This episode of Addressing Gettysburg is brought to you in part by me, audiobook narrator Mike Scott. Narrator of Savis Beattie's Bloody Autumn, the Shenandoah Valley Campaign of 1864, and Unlike Anything That Ever Floated, the Monitor and Virginia and the Battle of Hampton Roads. If you are an author or publisher interested in having your titles produced as audiobooks, or even just in learning more about the process, give me a shout. You can find my contact info on my website, MikeScottVoice.com. That's MikeScottVoice.com.
And Civil War Trails. It's the world's largest open-air museum, and they offer over 1,300 sites across 6 states. Drive the Gettysburg campaign turn by turn, paddle to Frederick Douglass's birthplace, or hike to remote earthworks and artillery positions. Visit civilwartrails.org to request a brochure and explore their interactive map. Follow Civil War Trails and create some history of your own.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. This is the first episode recorded in our new studio. Isn't that exciting? Yes, very exciting. So I don't know if it's going to sound different to you at all. It's a slightly different room, slightly different, it's a totally different recorder. None of this matters to you. But if it is different, we'll tweak it along the way as we go, so bear with us. We are talking today about when General Meade, George Gordon Meade, took command of the Army of the Potomac before the Gettysburg campaign. During the Gettysburg campaign, before the battle, forgive me. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Make sure that you have your notifications turned on. And also, don't forget our weekly show, Fridays at 5 on YouTube, live. It's very exciting. Lots of people love it. Check it out, because you might learn something about what's going on in Gettysburg today. In fact, we call it Addressing Gettysburg today. And if you use the Apple Podcast app, please leave a 5-star review. Reviews, liking, sharing, and subscribing are the best ways to help us grow our audience. And of course, tell your friends about it. Okay, so Jim Pangburn is with us today, a veteran of the show, and he loves George Meade, doesn't he, Jim?
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before. You feel that oftentimes Meade gets the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's unfair. I think so too. And so we're going to talk about when he becomes the commander of the Army of the Potomac right now. Give us a little bit of background on Meade leading up to the Gettysburg campaign. He was the 5th Corps commander. How did he get there? And how did he perform?
I think he performed pretty well, given the fact that he was given the command at 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, June 28th, 3 days before the battle, and is told, he's not given a choice. He's ordered to take command and told, the enemy's out in Pennsylvania, away from home soil. Perfect opportunity to go get him, destroy him, end the war. Oh, by the way, make sure you always keep your army between them and Baltimore and Washington. If he fills these two conditions within, less than a week,
right,
and essentially wins a turning point battle in the Civil War. He's the right man for the right hour. The Union Army could not afford to lose another battle in the East at this point, and certainly not on home soil.
No, that would have been embarrassing.
It might have been enough for the people in the North to say, hey, we've had it with this.
Yeah.
And Lee knew that. That's what he's playing on.
Right.
He knows, he's reading papers. He knows the people of the North are tiring of the war. And so you said, Matt, that Meade had been 5th Corps commander at Chancellorsville. And we'll get into this. This ties into one of the questions, but he was I was just looking at this last night. I kind of forgot about this. At Chancellorsville, they had center grand divisions.
Yes.
So you had groups of corps, and they had 3 grand divisions. He was the commander of the central one. Mm-hmm. And then they get rid of that after Chancellorsville before Gettysburg.
Too bulky? Is that the reason why they got rid of it?
I think it was unwieldy in command structure.
Yeah. So, and he was, what was he in that whole scheme?
Center Grand.
He was the commander of the Center Grand Division.
Which included, I believe, the 5th, 3rd, maybe the 1st Corps.
Okay.
Or 3 Corps, I think that was the 3. The 3 that he commanded as the left wing coming up to Gettysburg. And, he was from Philadelphia. He'd fought well on the Peninsula during the Peninsula Campaign in 1962. He was in charge of the Pennsylvania Reserves at one point. You've heard of them, haven't you?
Yeah.
Sorry, Eric.
Unmute me. Yeah, I've heard of them a time or two.
Okay, so he commanded the Pennsylvania Reserves. How was he as a division and corps commander? Was he a steady guy? Seems like a steady guy. I'm assuming he was all along.
Yeah, that's just the thing. That's why he was so good, I think, at Gettysburg, is because they needed someone who wasn't going to make a foolish mistake, who was going to be kind of conservative, not risk too much in a situation like that. And I think that had earned the respect of a lot of the highest-ranking generals in the Army of the Potomac and probably some of the officials in Washington.
Was he generally well-liked among the high command in the Army?
He was respected.
Respected.
He had a temper.
Yeah.
And he would snap at members of his staff, and they were, and people knew that. So I think he offended some people that way, but I think he was highly respected as a commander.
And so when so they're coming up to what is going to be Gettysburg. They don't know that at the time. But the armies are moving up into the north. And you said he was a wing commander at that point, or are you talking prior to?
I'm sorry. I was thinking about Reynolds. Reynolds was the left wing commander. So the 1st, 11th, and 3rd Corps. So that's kind of what Meade commanded at Chancellorsville. I got a little confused there.
Okay, gotcha.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. Glad we caught it, because then somebody would comment, well, he didn't get that right.
Right. You're right. But we got to it before they could do it, right?
Exactly. We caught it.
Try again.
We beat you. So, all right. So he, as he's coming up, though, he's the 5th Corps commander. Is he beloved in the 5th Corps?
I think the men like him for the most part. I think they realized there could be other commanders that they could be under that might not be so happy about.
Right. Okay. Sykes. They didn't like Sykes.
They supposedly made a comment when Sykes took command of the 5th Corps after he moved up to Army Command that perhaps the reserves will think better of me now.
Yeah, I think he did say something like that, didn't he?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he had a bit of a sense of humor.
I don't know that he was well liked so much as he was very much respected for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a West Pointer, duty is this whole thing. The best thing about Meade is he's not a political general. He's not involved in that political stuff. And I think that's one of the big reasons they chose him.
So when he takes command, tell us about how he finds out about it and the whole circumstances there. And,
I love talking about it.
Yeah, this is a good story.
Well, Hooker had been in command during the Battle of Chancellorsville, and Washington had gotten pretty tired of him. There was a story that he'd been out of camp, after, I think, Chancellorsville, and they were concerned about that at some point, and the women coming into the camp, and all that kind of thing. And Hooker was convinced that the Confederates outnumbered him, and he was constantly asking for more troops, and they were getting pretty fed up with him. And finally, when he asked for forces at Harper's Ferry to be abandoned and added to the Army of the Potomac before Gettysburg, he got kind of petulant and said, I can't operate under these conditions, and I beg to be relieved of the position that I occupy. I've always wondered whether he really meant it or whether he was saying, hey, you better support me here. But
to me, it always seemed like when a 12-year-old doesn't get his way and he says, I'm running away from home to see if his parents would beg him not to, and then they go ahead.
Yeah, I don't honestly know whether that was the case or not. I don't know if he was surprised. He didn't really seem like he was surprised when he found out. But it's really interesting, Matt. It's June 28th. It's really early on a Sunday morning, and the entire Army of the Potomac is around Frederick. They're surrounded all around Frederick. They cross the Potomac River into Maryland, and the special courier James Hardee comes by train from Washington. Well, a special courier comes at 3 o'clock in the morning. Usually means trouble. And they were keeping it pretty on the QT pretty much because Hardee, who was a colonel, or lieutenant colonel, did not wear a uniform when he came into Frederick. So they were kind of keeping this kind of quiet. So I think Meade was sleeping, and Hardee comes in and heightens the tension by saying, I'm sorry, General Meade, but I'm here to bring you trouble. So Meade thinks he's probably being relieved or something, and they light a candle, and Hardee gives Meade his orders, and it says, you are placed in command of the Army of the Potomac. He's not given a choice like Reynolds was a month before, and told, the Confederates are out there in Pennsylvania, go get them. But always keep your army between Washington and Baltimore and the Confederates, which is, to me, almost seems contradictory.
It's kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tough.
But is he given the discretion to attack if need be, or is he just waiting? Are they thinking we want Meade to use this army defensively?
They told him, they said, you will not be hampered from Washington by minute instructions.
Okay.
And
so they're not going to micromanage.
And the forces at Harper's Ferry are at your discretion. So they're telling Hooker he can't do it.
Right.
And he gets all upset, but they're telling Meade, hey, if you want this force from Harper's Ferry, that's up to you. And you can fire anybody you want or elevate anybody to command, and it's not going to have to go through us. This is an emergency, and you do what you feel is best. And they really got behind him and supported him.
So why do you think it is that they wouldn't give Hooker these things, but immediately turn around and give it to the new commander?
Because they were pretty much fed up with Hooker, and they didn't really trust him. And after Chancellorsville, where he came up with a great plan, and then just kind of froze up. And, that's one of the interesting things. Hooker got around behind Lee, and Lee is now between the 6th Corps at Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. And Meade's coming across the Rappahannock River. He had a chance to attack Lee's rear when Lee turned to go west toward Chancellorsville, toward Hooker. And when he got there, he detached Jackson and made the famous flank attack.
Right.
Well, if Meade had been set free to attack Lee's rear, I don't think Lee would have been able to detach Jackson and make that flank attack. And I think Meade was pretty dissatisfied with Hooker, particularly over that. He thought he could have been used more effectively.
So he realizes that he's now in command and he has no choice. And is he happy now because now he has all the power, or is he not liking this?
I think he really felt the responsibility. But the thing about Meade is he's a man of duty. Uh-huh. He's not looking at the political implications or how, hey, I just got elevated to the command of the Army of the Potomac. He sends a message to his wife and he says, I didn't seek this position. I was ordered to take it. And as a man of duty, West Pointer, it's my job to do the best I can. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'll do. I mean, he didn't make any great claims with these orders, I will whip Bobby Lee, like Hooker did.
Right.
He just says, hey, I'm going to do the best I can here. That's it.
And that's kind of what I admire about the guy is he doesn't like it, but, this is the cards, the hand that he's been dealt, and he's going to do his best.
Right.
And I think he does. Okay, so does he get back to sleep that night, or does he stay up and... No. So what does he do?
He and the courier go to Hooker.
Okay.
I think Meade was somewhere southwest of Frederick, and then the two of them went to Hooker's tent and told Hooker what was going on. I think Washington wanted Meade to have the command and know he had it before Hooker did. And then they went to Hooker's tent, and apparently Hooker took it pretty well. And they discussed some things. And then as soon as Hooker ceded the command and made a general order to the troops announcing that he was leaving, immediately Hardee returned and sent a message to Washington and said, it's been done. Mm-hmm. Meade's in command. And it's gone pretty smoothly. And
everybody breathes a sigh of relief for a while.
Yeah, the only problem that apparently Meade said he had with Hooker was they were talking about the distribution, the positions of the different corps around Frederick. And at one point, Meade said something about, geez, they seem like they're kind of spaced out.
Right.
Hooker bristled at that. And apparently that was really the only time that there was any kind of tension between the two guys. Hooker handled it pretty much with class, from what I understand.
And did Hooker then hand over all the details of the plan that he has been operating under, or did he have no plan?
Yeah. He was basically just kind of intercepting the Confederates on the east side of the Blue Ridge and the Catoctons while Lee was already, in Pennsylvania raiding. I don't know, what Hooker said to Meade about his intentions. But one thing's for sure. As soon as Meade takes command, the very next day, I mean, he's issuing orders that very first day. No, I don't think he went back to his tent and slept, although he probably needed it. He immediately issues orders for the march. And on the 29th of June and the 30th of June, you hear about Stonewall Jackson moving 30 to 40 miles in the Shenandoah Valley in 1862. Now it's the Union Army marching 30 to 35 miles a day because they are anxious to get to Pennsylvania and deal with the Confederates who are on northern soil.
Yeah. So things are accelerated at this point then.
Things are happening pretty fast.
And what does Meade do? Hooker really doesn't give him much to go on, right? Does Hooker know where anybody is? How's the intelligence?
Yeah, he knows where the corps are positioned.
No. I mean, I'm sorry. Where the Confederates
where Lee is.
are? Yeah.
Yeah, they'd gotten reports, but the thing is muddled because you've got Early's division that came through Gettysburg on June 26th and is over at York. Gordon's on the Susquehanna River on the 28th. On the 27th, Ewell reaches Carlisle, directly north of Gettysburg.
Right.
And then you got, they don't know it. The Union Army doesn't necessarily know it, but the main body of the Confederate lines over at Chambersburg. So you got these three different positions. You're like, where's the main body? What's going on? So Meade's job really is to move north quickly and make some kind of contact and try to get the Confederates to consolidate so he knows exactly where they are.
Is he... I'm just trying to imagine. I'm wakened in the middle of the night, and I'm just, this burden is thrown on my shoulders, and now I have to go and make sense of information I'm not privy to as a Corps commander, but now I'm the Army commander. So now everything, and I've got to make decisions based on all this information, and I have to make those decisions quickly in order to close the gap between us and Lee.
And you know what else you got to do, Matt? You got to find maps.
Yes.
Now, consider this. Lee knew as early as maybe a year or so before he was going to invade Pennsylvania.
Right.
Supposedly he was going to invade it during the Antietam campaign, but his orders were found and he had to concentrate the army, fight the battle in Maryland. Mm-hmm. So he already has a map that Jedediah Hotchkiss has drawn between here and Harrisburg. And the original map is on display in the Hanley Library in Winchester, Virginia.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh,
and
it's just down there.
I've only seen copies of it. I haven't seen the original.
Right.
But supposedly just about every farm in the Gettysburg area is on that map.
Really?
It's not a contour map, but it's a location map with roads and stuff.
Sure.
Well, the Union Army didn't know that Lee was going to make a movement north until they actually start making it.
Right.
So now they're moving north trying to stay with Lee. They're scrambling to find maps. So he's trying to find maps, Corps commanders and figure out what roads they can go on. You got to keep these guys on different roads. You got to spread them out to protect Baltimore, Washington, but also use different roads so that people aren't getting, caught behind each other and slowed down like. That's what happened in Middleburg. Sickles was moving too slow in his opinion, and the Second Corps, I guess it was under Hancock, hadn't made the progress that Lee wanted to make. When he fires off a missive to Sickles and admonishes him about the slow movement of your wagons. That didn't help later on.
No. So how do they find the maps? Like, do they just scour the countryside for anybody who has a map? Or
yeah, I think they're going into communities, and saying to mayors or whatever, do you have a town map or county map, particularly county map, maybe from a courthouse or something like that, and just saying, listen, we need him, and sending quarters and guys on horses out.
But they're getting official maps, not something that's Tom at the local tavern drew up for you real quick.
No, I think they're looking at county maps.
Right.
You've seen the 1850s Adams County map.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of those counties like Carroll County in Maryland probably had those.
Yeah. Isn't there a story about the Adams County map? Was it Early who had a copy of the map? And what is the story, Mike? Do you remember the story?
I think he went to a tavern or something.
He went to a tavern, got the map, and then it
pulled it off the wall.
Pulled it off the wall, right? Yeah. That's what. Yeah. And then didn't some lady keep it afterwards because he made her house his headquarters? Right? Is that the story? And it's in town here, right?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Adams County Historical Society might have it.
Yeah. Oh, I think they do. I think Tim said that they haven't. All right, so he gets his maps and everything, and he decides, okay, so we're going to put everybody on these roads. Where is he aiming to send everyone?
Oh, I'm glad you asked me that question. Because if you go from Littlestown down to Taneytown, Maryland, the two towns are connected, just northeast of Littletown on the road that leads to, northeast of Taneytown on the road that leads to Littlestown, there's an historic marker outside town that says this was Meade's camp the night of the 30th.
Okay.
What does that tell you? He's headed northeast from Taneytown. He's headed in the direction of York. Because his most recent information is Early at York and Gordon. Yeah. And he's thinking, okay, and he knew that if he could intercept them, he could force them to turn away from the Susquehanna River and intercept them before they crossed the Susquehanna River and attacked Harrisburg. But when I saw that historical marker and saw that he was camped northeast of Tawnytown. I said, this is because he's thinking that's the direction he's going to head the next day.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting all these reports. And so Buford was the cavalry commander was very important in getting to Gettysburg, and getting these reports. But Meade had to know, where is the main body?
Right.
Is it over here to the east toward York, or is it over here toward the mountains toward Chambersburg, or what?
So he's heading that way towards York and everything. Now, when things start, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I Meade's headquarters is northeast of Tawnytown, but you the night before the battle, you've got Reynolds already in Pennsylvania, Howard's Corps, 11th Corps in Emmitsburg, and Sickles' 3rd Corps between Emmitsburg and Tawnytown, what's called Bridgeport, very close to the Pennsylvania line.
Right.
So, he's sending half of his army toward this area, to see what's going on here. But, that the right wing, the 5th Corps, the 2nd Corps, the 6th Corps is all the way over in Manchester, Maryland. So you can see that the right wing is kind of headed in the northeasterly direction. But it's also an indication he's not real sure where the main body is.
Right.
And he's also spread out in a position along Pipe Creek where he's protecting with Baltimore, Washington.
So he's got a lot of things that he has to consider in the movements of his army.
He's got to think about roads, not too many corps using the same roads so they can move quickly. Mutual support. That's the beauty of what Meade did. He spread out to protect Baltimore, Washington along Pipe Creek, but each corps is in near proximity to the next corps in case they get in trouble.
Yeah.
And they can all move to wherever
to where the help is needed.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so he's he does know, though, that there are Confederates in Chambersburg as well, right? Like, he knows about York.
Yeah. He knows they're spread out on the road between Gettysburg. And remember, they had come through Gettysburg on the 26th of June. Right. Well, at least Gordon's brigade, but Early went north of that.
Yeah.
So he knows they're all along that line. He just doesn't know where the main body is, real power.
But the way he has everyone arrayed is, the left wing is protecting the left flank of the army.
Right, in case the Confederates suddenly come out of the mountain passes and attack them on the...
So basically the way it's arrayed is that, at any point, if the Confederates were to turn towards whatever wing of the army, then that's the touch point, and then everyone would concentrate there. Right?
And look what happened. The contact is made here at Gettysburg on the 1st of July. And by the mid to late afternoon of the second day, the entire Union Army is at Gettysburg. Yeah. 6th Corps shows up by late afternoon. Yeah. They're the furthest away, about 34 miles. But he keeps them so generally close together, spread out enough that it has to be to protect Baltimore and Washington, to keep the roads unclogged, but close enough that when they find the Confederates, bam, there they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they did really concentrate here quicker than the Confederates did. And formed the fishhook line. And we know what happens over the next 2 days with that.
Well, they didn't have any traffic jam in the mountains to deal with, like the Confederates did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
you're talking about Longstreet behind AP Hill? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
They have to sit there and wait.
Yeah, when you look at the terrain, it's generally open, somewhat rolling. But the terrain between here and Emmitsburg, to some extent, Tawnytown, is pretty easy to travel.
Yeah. It's flat. And there's
rolling.
Like there's parallel roads. Like in the mountains, it's like you got a mountain pass with a road through it, and that's it. That's your choice. So it's harder to get through the mountains. So it's almost like as soon as the first shot was fired, like nothing went right for Lee after that, except for the first day. He had a pretty good victory there, but still, like everything was being set up for it to be a failure.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't want to fight the battle until the whole army was concentrated. And you got roads in Early, north of Gettysburg the night before the battle. But, his army is, they don't think there's much at Gettysburg, and they send East Division, Pettigrew's brigade down from the mountains to see what's here, because they've been reading newspapers and seeing things about sales on shoes and stuff like that. And they needed supplies, so they're waiting, for the rest of Early's division to get there, or Early and Rhodes, Ewell's Corps. And they just think they're going to go down on a reconnaissance, and Lee gave them specific orders. If you run into a Union presence, don't bring on a battle. We're not ready to fight it.
Right.
So, showed there's Buford, and they turn around and report what they've seen, and it's not believed they've seen anything more than militia, and they come back the next day, and the thing grows into the biggest thing in this half of the world. So this is what orders are for. The movie Gettysburg, remember he says that?
This is why we have orders.
This is why we have orders.
So the 30th, he is receiving information from Buford and Reynolds.
Yes.
About the disposition of Confederates and how close they are to him and what the Buford plans to do and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So when July 1st occurs, or dawns, I should say, and the fighting starts, the Pipe Creek Circular is already being disseminated, correct?
Yeah, they're all lined up along it. They're in a defensive position.
Right.
And when you read, Kent Masterson's book that we talked about earlier this year, Meade at Gettysburg, what he's saying is that he wanted Reynolds to come up here and make contact and then withdraw, draw the Confederate Army down to Pipe Creek and attack Meade, which is a great position. I mean, it's high, gradual banks, open fields of fire. That's what he's hoping. And then Reynolds gets killed. And some people say, well, Doubleday took command and Reynolds never told him, really what Meade had planned. Well, Doubleday just assumes they're supposed to fight a battle there and, puts the men in. And at that point, they had the numerical advantage over the Confederates early in the morning and not so much in the afternoon.
But Reynolds never received the Pipe Creek Circular, correct? Or we don't know if he received it.
I would assume that he did receive it.
Oh, I always thought he didn't.
I was fairly confident he got he did see it.
Oh, that he did.
I thought so.
Would he have seen it at Merch Tavern maybe the night before?
No, because it was being sent out the morning of the 1st. Yeah.
Oh, on the 1st.
He would have had to come to Reynolds when he gets the orders to get up to Gettysburg with the 11th Corps in support. He'd have to come at that.
Say that again, Mike.
When he's given the orders in the morning of July 1st to go to Gettysburg with the 11th Corps in support, he might have received the circular at that time. I haven't seen anything.
I haven't seen anything. Yeah.
I'll have to ask Chris Army about that because he addressed that in the roundtable meeting we were at.
Oh, I should check my notes because I took notes at that one. So maybe, I don't know. But I was always under the impression that he didn't because he was dead by the time it would have gotten to him.
Yeah. Well, if it's issued on the 1st, then that's the case because he's up pretty early on the morning of the 1st and moving pretty fast.
Right. Well, right, because he gets moving.
I mean, they're on the road by 7:30.
7:30, 8 o'clock. He is.
Reynolds.
He is, but the Corps, I think, is a little later once they get moving. But he goes ahead of them.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. But okay, so whatever. So he's dead. And so obviously Doubleday, evidently doesn't know or whatever, like you said.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Meade, however, what is it that you're able to glean from what we do know of him on the morning of July 1st regarding whether or not he wants to fight wherever the fight may be, or if he does want to actually withdraw to Pipe Creek?
Well, I know that before Reynolds was killed on the 1st, he did send a message back to Meade and said, now he came up the Emmitsburg Road. So he clearly sees the round tops to his right, Cemetery Ridge and Cemetery Hill, before he veers off, before he gets to the Cadore Barn or at the Cadore Barn up toward the seminary. And he says, basically he tells Meade that the ground up here is just as good or better than what you're going to find to fight a defensive battle at Pipe Creek. He said, I will barricade the streets if necessary and fight them inch by inch. And he's basically saying, listen, I'll hold them off. I'll buy the time. But this is the place to fight a defensive battle. Bring the army up here.
Okay.
And then during the day, Meade is in contact with Hancock, 2nd Corps. And so Hancock is with Meade on the 1st day, and he's got a direct contact with Meade. He knows what Meade is thinking, what he wants. And of course, as you know, Meade gives him the authority to take command when he gets here, even over Howard, who ranks him, and make the decision about whether you want to fight the battle here or not. So Hancock is pretty heavily trusted by Meade, but I think that's because Meade is in direct contact with him before he comes up here.
That's one of the things I like about Meade is that he delegates and he trusts his subordinates to, do what they have to do. Lee does the same thing, but it doesn't serve him well here because his subordinates, 2 of his 3 corps commanders, have never commanded a corps before.
That's right.
But it works for Meade. Why do you think? What do you think that is? Is it just a difference in personality of the corps commanders in the 2 armies? Or?
You know that Lee gave very general instructions.
Yeah.
Was not a micromanager, and he used to say, "I'll get the army to the field, and then I don't, hamper my generals." And we talk about this a lot when we talk about the question of what if Stonewall Jackson had been here, and what happened with Ewell, and you got Lee up here that gives very general instructions. Stonewall, go to the valley and clear the Yankees. How you do it's up to you.
Right.
And then there's Stonewall, who's very different. Gives very specific orders, and if you don't follow them to the letter, look out.
Right.
Ask Garnett about that at Kernstown. And so Jackson's out of the equation. Now it's, Ewell, take those hills, if practicable, do not bring on a general engagement. Here's Ewell that's used to getting specific orders, and this is what he gets.
Right.
He's going, what is this if it's not a general engagement we've been fighting all day? Do not bring on a general engagement. What's he talking about? So I think that hurt. And Lee said that on the way up to Pennsylvania. He said there have never been such men in an army before. They will go anywhere and do anything if properly led. But that's the problem. Where do we find the men to lead them? And at that point, he was feeling the loss of some of his best high-ranking commanders. A lot of those guys were West Pointers. And now at this point in the war, a lot of those guys are gone.
Yeah.
And the guys that are moving up into those positions don't have that kind of experience or education.
Right.
So I think it had something to do with the command structure and the command style. But in Hancock's case, he's right there with Meade on the first day. And when he comes up here, he's fresh from talking to Meade, knows what he wants.
Because Hancock is relatively new to Corps Command.
Yeah. We're going to probably touch on this in some of the questions that your listeners have asked. But the second Corps commander at Chancellorsville was Darius Couch. And he can't stand what happened with Hooker at Chancellorsville. So he says, I cannot serve under that man. And asked to be relieved, and they put him in charge of the Department of Susquehanna at Harrisburg.
Yeah.
And he was a pretty highly respected guy. And when he said that, I think that got Washington's attention, I think.
Yeah. So so Hancock comes up. So what is going on with Meade during the day of July 1st? Because he doesn't get here till late at night. So what is he doing? I'm assuming just having some mint juleps and smoking cigars, right?
He took some of his staff and a map maker, and they started riding along the Fishhook line, mostly Cemetery Hill. I think they actually went up on Little Round Top.
Who, Meade?
Meade, around midnight, 1 o'clock.
Okay.
He met with Hooker at the gatehouse, the Evergreen Cemetery gatehouse, which is Hooker's headquarters. Spoke to him a little.
Howard.
What did I say, Hooker?
Hooker.
I meant Howard.
They both begin with an H-O, so
yeah,
that's an honest mistake.
Yeah. Oliver is Howard. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So yeah, they actually. But the thing is, it's dark, so you can't really see. You can sort of feel, I think, the elevation. And he had an idea of that this was high ground. It was probably good ground to defend. And I think that's one of the great things about Meade. He chooses to fight on the defensive here.
Yeah.
Take the advantage of the defensive.
Which is kind of what Lee supposedly wanted to do.
Right. He wants Meade to come attack him in the mountains.
Right.
That's why he's waiting for those Rhodes and Early to come join him.
Yeah.
And his men drift down.
So, but prior to Meade getting here, though, what's he doing back at Taneytown? His headquarters are in Taneytown.
Yeah, he came up late. He's basically communicating with the 6th Corps and the 5th Corps, and letting them know what's going on the left up here at Gettysburg, and then issuing orders to start to move in this direction.
As an Army commander, that's probably proper for him to have done it that way on July 1st, because not everybody is up here yet.
Right.
And they need to know where the central location is.
Right.
And so he needs to stay until everyone is on their way.
Exactly, Matt.
To wherever he wants them to go.
And Taneytown is right in the middle of the Union position, right before the battle. So he's in a centralized location. The Taneytown Road gives him straight movement right into the heart of the conflict.
So now, when he gets here, though, around, what'd you say, midnight is when he arrives in Gettysburg, or late at night?
It was around midnight, from what I understand. Yeah. It was dark.
What does he do? Besides, you said he rode the line a bit.
Probably had something to eat.
Yeah. Okay, so he gets something to eat, he rides the line, and then talks to his Corps commanders.
Getting a report of the battle, what the situation was. Howard had heard that Doubleday supposedly had given way. So on the left,
okay,
which Howard had done on the right, but he's going to replace Doubleday in 1st Corps Command, which Doubleday resented the rest of his career. I don't think Doubleday got a fair shake on the left on that.
Yeah,
Howard had taken command by rank. Hancock had shown up, but had been given authority by Meade to take command. And so that was a little bit iffy when Hancock started, giving orders and stuff.
Right. Okay.
I think don't want to get off the topic too much, but I've always thought that Howard should have got more credit than he did. Hancock maybe gets a little bit more than he should. I'm just saying that because we know that Howard chose Cemetery Hill to rally on because he left the reserve there.
Right.
4,000 men. And the Union Army rallies there. That's proof that Howard saw Cemetery Hill as the key position.
Sure.
But Hancock, he's the one, he handled it pretty well. Howard's kind of like, what is this, junior officer doing, telling me we're going to stay here? And then Hancock, just kind of says, well, we'll put your guys over here and my guys over here, but we're going to make a stand. And, Hancock, wow, when he arrived, it was the lowest point in the Union Army in the Battle of Gettysburg. All the bad D's are in effect. And they're retreating through the town from two different directions. 4,000 guys are captured in the town, demoralized, defeated, disorganized, all the bad D's. And, they probably would have just kept on going down the Baltimore Pike and the Tawny Tent Road back toward Maryland to that pre-prepared position. But, Hancock arrives and says, no, it's a great position. At that low moment, we can make a stand here.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my colleagues, retired Special Forces Colonel Kevin Covenauer, who I've mentioned before.
Sure.
And he said something I thought was really interesting. You hear about Hancock, and he's got those white paper collars, and the men looked at him, and they were so inspired. And I remember Kevin once said, it really wasn't so much Hancock that inspired him, but what he represented. 10,000 men of the Second Corps got to be close by. So we've got reinforcements, fresh guys. I thought, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's true. So July 2nd, what is Meade doing? Is he taking an active part in commanding the army, or is he basically leaving it to his...
He was very concerned about the right over at Culp's Hill.
Okay.
About an attack over there. What he does on the second day is he sends out orders to all the Corps commanders to get familiarized with the roads in their areas. Not only for a potential retreat in case things didn't go well, but for mutual support. You got to know how you can move on the battlefield.
Sure.
And of course, Sickles later used that against him and said, he didn't want to fight the Battle of Gettysburg. He was preparing to leave, and then only by my moving out to the Peach Orchard did I lure him into...
See, and that's such a slimeball politician thing to do. Like, knowing that the general public doesn't realize that it's smart for everybody to know all the roads for whatever reason.
You have to have a contingency.
Yes.
If you didn't do that and things went wrong, you'd be irresponsible.
Yes. Okay, so he is concerned about Culp's Hill in the morning because there's nobody on Culp's Hill. Except for, the 7th Indiana?
Well, overnight they've started. On the night of the 1st, when the Confederates kind of reconnoitered the area, they ran right into the 7th Indiana, which is about the only guys up there at the time. But then as the night goes on, the 12th Corps is moving in.
Okay.
Because 7th Corps, or 7th Indiana was part of the Iron Brigade,
right.
1st Corps. So now the 12th Corps comes in, and now all of a sudden overnight, it's becoming a more formidable position. You got Greene starting to dig in on both upper and lower Culp's Hill.
Right. So they're, by noon, they're pretty much on Culp's Hill. I think, what is it? They start arriving at 8 o'clock or so in the morning, I think.
The 12th Corps was there the night before. It started moving in.
Oh, Williams Division was there for the night before? Okay.
They're moving in.
And then Geary was down on Little Round Top. Okay. All right. So he's concerned about that. So he shores up Culp's Hill. He makes sure that everybody knows the roads. Go ahead.
Yeah. He's already determined that he's going to fight a defensive battle.
Right. So once you determine that you're going to fight a defensive battle, if you're George Meade, are you running around constantly flitting here and flitting there, or are you trusting that your subordinates are doing their jobs and only running around when you need to? He
was very concerned about Little Round Top being occupied. Part of Geary's division had been on the northern face of that the night before, and then suddenly they moved away. And Meade is sending messages to Sickles' headquarters, which is kind of west of the Tawnytown Road, probably behind where the Father Corby monument is in that area. And his own son, George, is on his staff. 4 times on July 2nd, Meade sends messengers to the Corps saying, have you occupied that position on the left, meaning Little Round Top? And Sickles is like, yeah, we're getting around to it. Yeah. I'm going to take care of it, yeah.
And Sickles' men are on Little Round Top, but just the northern slope, right? Like just where Geary was?
I've never been real sure exactly where Sickles was. He did go out as far as Devil's Den and occupy that.
Right. When he went out.
Right. And he doesn't like that low ground that Plum Run runs through. And where Cemetery Ridge gradually declines to that area just north of Little Round Top. And I'll tell you what, this is a great time of year to go out there. You go out there along Sedgwick Avenue, where the 5th and 6th headquarters markers are. Yeah. Just before Sedgwick Avenue, which becomes Hancock Avenue, just before it bottoms out and starts to rise north of Cemetery Ridge, and you look left in those trees because the leaves are down right now, and you can see the Emmitsburg Road Ridge. You can see I believe you can see the Sherfy Barn, the red Sherfy.
Yeah.
And you can see what Sickles is seeing.
Right.
You know, and he's thinking about his artillery in that low swampy ground, and the Confederates, seizing that high ground in front of him. Doesn't want to get caught in that. But, I've always thought, I hope I'm not getting off the...
No. This is all good. Don't worry.
Well, for years, I'd stand with people up on Little Round Top, and you look at that view. What was Sickles thinking? I used to think, well, maybe he thought he had Little Round Top covered by moving out to Devil's Den, and just didn't think the Confederates would get so far around that they could come off Warfield Ridge and make a direct assault. But I was reading something that Sickles said after the war about Little Round Top, and he said there was no position. I thought that's a really puzzling thing to say. What do you mean there's no position? Everything is a position, right?
Well.
And then a thought crossed my mind. Unless you haven't been to said position. In your mind, it doesn't exist because you haven't been there. And then all of a sudden, the light went off in my head. That's it. Sickles never stood on Little Round Top. Yeah. I challenge you. I challenge anybody. Stand on Little Round Top and tell me that you could see that view and then abandon that hill.
Right.
I don't think he ever went up.
No. I always feel that every army in the world could come at me, and I'm on Little Round Top, and I'll have 30 men, and we'll defend it. Of course, I'm naive, but you know what I mean. It looks like a formidable position, because it kind of is.
Right. I think he got fixated with the high ground in front of him along the Emmitsburg Road Ridge.
Yeah.
And the terrain north of Little Round Top, they would have had to come through. Well, drive down Sedgwick Avenue. What is it? It's not only low, but on the right side of the road, as you're heading away from Little Round Top, it's wooded.
Yeah.
It's rocky. And you got to go through quite a bit of that before you get to where Sedgwick statue is. And then you got to go up the north side of Little Round Top, which is all rocky and wooded, and there's no road like there is today.
No.
So it would have been difficult. Probably would take Sickles a good deal of time to get up there.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever went up there.
And I know Wheatfield Road was there, but did it go all the way to the Tawnytown Road like it does today?
I believe it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but it, like you said, it doesn't go up Little Round Top, so that would just take you straight.
I'm thinking of Sykes Avenue.
Yeah, no, I know. That was just in my head. I had to ask that question. Okay, now you said something else that made me think of a question, and now I forgot it. Damn it.
Happens to me all the time.
I know.
It'll come to you. It will.
I know. Okay, so about Sickles not going on Little Round Top at all. Have you cleared this with Jim Hessler?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay.
I'd be interested to see what he thinks.
So would I. Because that would be the battle of the Jims. If he disagrees with you,
There was no position.
But no, that makes sense though. That makes sense to me though. Like there was no position, and that sounds like someone who never went there, and it sounds like a careless error on his part.
Yeah.
Because anybody else who has been there, whether they were there at the battle or since the battle, can look at it and go, how is this no position? Look at all these boulders.
How can you say that?
Yeah.
If you've been up there.
Yeah.
And I'll be fair to Sickles. I think if he had gone up there, maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but I think if he had gone up there and seen that view, he might not have made that forward movement. He may not have abandoned Little Round Top.
I mean, are you aware of, and anybody in the room, if you've heard of something like this, just shout it out, but are you aware of anyone who is far more learned on military science than myself and the art of all this stuff, that make the argument that had he stayed on the ridgeline where he was supposed to go, an experienced military man would say, well, if I have good artillery positions here, anybody that goes up on that ridge I could blow off before they set off. And then if they're going to send infantry towards me, there's fences, there's woods, there's swamp, there's all this stuff that they can get bogged down in, and my artillery and eventually muskets can just tear them apart. Because when I look at that ground, I go, all right, it's not the best ground, but if I'm assigned here, I can figure out a way to make this, make anybody who wants to try to come at me suffer. And I'm not a military man. I just play video games.
Well, what's the alternative?
I've made the argument for the position he actually took up when we had Jim Hessler on to talk about this.
You mean the Emmitsburg Road position?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's not bad. I mean, I don't think he's completely wrong there either, but go ahead.
The line that he's assigned to sucks. Look, you have to. You can't just talk about emplacing infantry, because infantry can only do so much.
Right.
You have to talk about positions in terms of what you can do with artillery from there.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Half of the cemetery ridge line that he's supposed to occupy is garbage.
Yeah.
Where do you put guns?
Yeah.
Not very. No, there's not a lot of good places for it.
Yeah,
but if you went up on Little Round Top and saw it, and with time, you might be able to get 2 batteries up there.
A battery.
Yeah. That's
one battery. And we know that because they put a battery up there.
Right.
Well, wait, there's that second one.
Battery L, 1st Ohio.
Uh-huh.
And they're not really on Little Round Top so much as they're on Munchauer's Knoll. There's only one section that's on the north slope, and it's just barely on the north slope. The other 2 sections are on Munchauer's Knoll.
Yeah, there you go. Well, okay.
So there's 2. You can place 2 batteries that are useful, kind of, against Longstreet's corps from where they actually attack. And, I mean, Sickles doesn't know Longstreet's coming when he makes his move out.
No.
Nobody does.
I mean, it was a pretty good guess, though, because when he sees that ground and he thinks, well, I don't want them to get up there, he had to know that they were moving.
This is what I said before, was I don't think Sickles, and I can't quantify this because there's no evidence to support this.
Right.
But looking at it, it seems to me that Sickles, they know where A.P. Hill's right is.
Yeah.
They know where that is.
Right.
Because they've sent scouts and there's been skirmishes.
Who is that? The 3rd Maine? Was it 3rd Maine out in Pitzer's Woods? And
they're
the
Vermont
second
U.S. First or 2nd U.S.?
First.
Yeah.
First?
Right. So they know where A.P. Hill's right is. Well, if you look at the Peach Orchard line with the same knowledge that the Army has at 11 o'clock in the morning on July 2nd, you're looking at the right flank of A.P. Hill's corps, which means you're basically sitting on top of it from the Peach Orchard. You're in an advantageous position to do one of 2 things: force A.P. Hill to cover that with at least a third of his corps if he's going to advance, or you can take him in flank. Right?
Yeah.
From the Peach Orchard line. The problem is Longstreet shows up and crashes the party.
Yes.
I mean,
he'll party crasher.
But if you look at the line that he's supposed to occupy, it's crappy.
No, I agree. But an order is an order.
If you're going to occupy Little Round Top, you've got to include that crappy area that you're talking about.
Yeah, you absolutely have.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it isn't the best position. And, it's so easy for us to sit and second guess someone 158 years later or whatever, So, but yeah. Okay, but this isn't about Sickles. It always, every time Sickles comes up, it turns into a big freaking debate.
Sorry I went down that road. Hard to avoid.
It's my fault. I let it go that way. It's all right. So, okay, where were we then? July 2nd, Meade. Okay, so then he has to deal with, why don't you tell me Meade's side of the story regarding Sickles and going out to the Peach Orchard? How about that? We'll tie it into the subject.
Well, have you heard the story? Sickles took Henry Hunt, the artillery commander, out to the Peach Orchard. What do you think about this? And he said, well, I have to agree. It does have its advantages in terms of artillery. And Sickles is basically trying to get, I think, Hunt to give him the approval,
right,
without having to get it from Meade.
Right.
And Hunt isn't going for it. He said, no, you got to talk to General Meade about this. You can't just do. So Meade comes out, finds Sickles out there, and says, General, it seems to me you're a little exposed out here. And Sickles points back to Cemetery Ridge, 3/4 mile away, 30 to 40 feet lower, and says, yes, General, but I have the high ground. And allegedly, Meade points out to the Blue Ridge Mountains about 7 miles away and says, yes, General, and that's high ground also. Tell me, just how far do you plan to go? And a light bulb goes off in Sickles' head. General, I'd be willing to withdraw if you think I should. And then before he even finishes the sentence, some 18 cannon or so are firing from the Warfield-Pitzer wood line 600 yards away at the Peach Orchard, and it's too late to withdraw Sickles.
Right.
So Meade says, stay here. I'll move reinforcements out here. And that's what Vincent is doing, moving up the Wheatfield Road past Little Round. They're going out to reinforce Sickles along with others. But the thing about Sickles' position, we debated and argued all the time, that salient is really a dangerous thing because it can and was attacked from two directions. So it doesn't matter how many guys you send out there.
Right.
When you have to fight on two different fronts, it's really just a matter of time before you give way, and he did.
Yeah.
Then he loses 4,200 men. Here I'm going back to Sickles again.
It's fine. It's fine.
But the case that I've always made when people argue, especially in Sickles' defense, I said, okay, but there's three things that happened to the Union Army, I think, that outweigh that. And one is when he returns to Cemetery Ridge, he's lost 4,200 men. He's disorganized. Mm-hmm. Okay, the Confederates are threatened to break. They follow him right through the Trousseau Farm, and they're threatening to break right through the center. Okay, that's one. He's in danger of the Union center by moving out to exposed position. Can't hold it.
Right.
And when falls back is in a dangerous position. So what do they do for help? They call from guys from Culp's Hill on the right. So guys from Culp's Hill come over, stabilize the line. That's fine. But they're leaving Culp's Hill just as it's being attacked.
Right.
Now it's going to take 7 hours next morning, the longest fighting of the battle, for the Union Army to retake the slopes on lower Culp's Hill. Mm-hmm. And then the left. Little Round Top, he's left and occupied. And other guys have to step in to cover his butt there and save the Union Army.
And then as that's winding down, the fighting at Culp's Hill kind of picks up. And now he's got to worry about that flank. And now, how much after, or even was it after, the fighting on the left, Little Round Top, that area, subsided before Culp's Hill began? Or was it still going on down on the left when Ewell attacks on
I think
Culp's
by
Hill?
6 o'clock at night, you're talking about down the southern end around Little Round Top?
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole southern end, yeah, not just Little Round Top.
Well, the attack starts with the Confederates by 4:30 and then up by the Peach Roach around 5. And there's fighting around Little Round Top around 6 or 6:30. It gets dark then around 7.
Right.
And the bombardment on the left from Benner's Hill started around 4:30. I don't think the Confederates really start to move across Rock Creek until about 6. They actually get into grips with the Union troops on Culp's Hill around 7 or so to 7:30. So it's going a little bit after the fight on the left at Culp's Hill started to fade out a little bit.
Okay. So now he's got to deal with that. Right. And he had sent all but one brigade of the 12th Corps to the left. Although one of those divisions doesn't arrive.
Yeah, one gets lost. They or something.
Go down to the outlets.
Yeah.
So, we'll go into that a little bit more. So, yeah.
Well, what I'm thinking about is the post-dark fighting on East Cemetery Hill. Because now the Confederates have kind of passed Culp's Hill, some of them, North Carolinians, and they're headed up onto East Cemetery Hill. And the Confederates get right up there in post-dark hours. That's the main Union supply line up there. Yeah. And then Hancock sends reinforcements to the cemetery.
Yeah.
Some brave fighting. Guys, Union artillerymen are up there fighting with their implements, and it got a little hairy up there.
Yeah, and it's always overlooked too, that part of the battle. But that's a pretty hairy moment there. I mean, they got up on top of the hill. How far did Mike and I were just down at the 20th Maine the other day, and Oates' men claim to have gotten up, into the center of their position, but not for very long, and it wasn't very many of them. But there was a good chunk that got up on top of Cemetery Hill, correct?
Yes.
And and so
East Cemetery Hill.
East Cemetery Hill. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry. So Meade, man, he had to have a splitting headache by the end of the second day.
The stress had to be pretty heavy.
Yeah.
The Confederates are attacking on, it seems like, all fronts.
Yeah.
But I think that's his finest moment at the end of that night.
Why is that?
When he holds the Council of War.
Okay, go into that.
Holds the Council of War at his headquarters. Warren came in. He'd been wounded. A lot of people say that he didn't want to fight it out, and so he was putting the responsibility on the Corps commanders to vote and decide what they wanted to do. But I think Meade knew exactly what he wanted to do, but I think he wanted to feel confident that he was being backed up by the Corps commanders, that was their judgment too.
Yeah.
That would reinforce him that he is right in what he's thinking. He needs reports from the different sectors of the battlefield, and the only people that can do that are the Corps commanders of those areas. So they decide 3 things. That's the agenda for the meeting on the night of the 2nd. Do we stay or do we go? Okay, we've taken some hits here. We have that pre-prepared position at Pipe Creek, but here we are. What do you think, guys? should we stay, continue? How's our position? And everybody pretty much agrees. Yeah, good. We're okay. We're going to stay. Okay, if we stay, and the question is, do we continue to let the Confederates attack us, smash their heads against our rocks in a defensive position? The attackers generally, in order to succeed on generally equal terrain, you generally have to have about a 3-to-1 advantage.
Yeah.
So he's got the advantage in the defensive, and they've held on pretty well, although it was hairy, both ends. But the Corps commanders are, saying, yeah, let's do it. Okay, so how do we go over the offensive, or do we continue to let them attack? We're going to let them attack. We will continue to fight in the defensive. Good decision. How long do we wait?
Right.
24 hours. Didn't have to wait that long.
Yeah.
1 o'clock the next afternoon, the bombardment ends. But here's something I talk about on tours a lot. When that Council of War breaks up, well, can I talk about Lee?
Sure.
Okay. So Lee has attacked both ends of the Confederate or the Union line.
Right.
He's made gains at Culp's Hill, lower Culp's Hill. Uh-huh. He's captured the Peach Orchard and Devil's Den, not Wheatfield, certainly not Little Round Top.
Right.
So he's looking from his headquarters, his command post, at Cemetery Ridge, where Pickett's charge will cross the next day. And he's saying, there's the Union center. They must have weakened their center, the Union Army, Cemetery Ridge, to send troops to the ends of their lines where I attacked them yesterday. Therefore, the center must be the weak point. Mm-hmm. And this is where he comes up with what he's been taught at West Point. Mass Napoleonic infantry assault. That's what Pickett's charge is. But on the other side of the line, Meade's breaking up with his Council of War, and he walks up to Henry Gibbon, I believe it was, who's commanding troops in the center. Gibbon, I believe if Lee attacks tomorrow, he'll be on your front. Gibbon says, General, why do you think that? Because they attacked us today on the ends of our lines, and we're still here. So tomorrow, if he attacks, it'll be on our front. Mm-hmm. And so Meade has actually anticipated Lee. He's a step ahead of him, and he's ready. Doesn't know exactly where a breakthrough is going to occur on Cemetery Ridge, but wherever it does, he'll be ready to converge men in that area. And we know what happened.
Yeah, so the morning, the alarm clock in the morning is fighting over on Culp's Hill.
About time the sun
July
comes
3rd,
up, around 4:30, fighting starts, yeah.
Yeah. And so what is Meade doing while that's going on? We don't really hear, when we hear about Culp's Hill, we don't really know, or I should say, I haven't really heard much about what Meade is doing while all that fighting is going. He's biting his nails. Yeah.
That's how I picture it anyhow.
So he
looks to one of his staff officers and asks for another whiskey, perhaps. I'm sorry.
Wait, I thought we were trying to
that's
defend
what I
Meade
would have
here.
done. Hey,
Yeah.
seriously, Matt, in that kind of, with the physical exertions that he's been through since he's taken command,
yeah,
and the stress that you touched on in the battle, there had to been moments where he just took a deep breath. But you can't really, because reports are coming into headquarters, coming and going constantly. I don't see that the poor man has much of a chance to barely breathe, let alone, after the battle, he wrote a letter to his wife, and he said, for the last 8 days or something like that, I haven't had a decent meal. I've hardly slept. I haven't taken a shower in a week.
Yeah.
But why didn't you pursue them, General?
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. So July 3rd, Culp's Hill, all that stuff is going on. Yeah, so is he sending reinforcements to Culp's Hill like he was doing on the left, or is Culp's Hill pretty secure at this point where he doesn't?
I think it's pretty secure by the 3rd. Guys that come over there overnight. There's artillery from Powers Hill that's supporting. Remember, the Confederates didn't really have artillery in their attack on Culp's Hill because of the woods and everything.
Yeah.
The Union had a little bit of, they had guns up there, on where the Baltimore Pike is today, near the Visitor Center, near Hunt Avenue, in that area. Mm-hmm. Some of that area wasn't quite as wooded as it is today. And what they've done now, last year, golly, in terms of tree removal over there, it just, anybody who has not been to Culp's Hill in the last little over a year needs to get yourself over there.
Yeah.
Because those pictures you saw of what it looked like after the battle, well, that's what it looks like now.
Yeah, it looks just like it.
It's exciting.
And who knows how long it'll stay that way, because it's hard to keep up with the undergrowth, so get out there while you can, especially in the winter. Winter especially.
Winter's great.
Yeah.
People don't think about that, Matt.
No, I know.
Tell them to come in the winter like, oh my gosh, you can see so much more.
You know what? We tell people to do that too, and many have taken that advice, and they all say, like, that's the best advice. Because A, you get the place to yourself. And if you can handle 50-mile-an-hour wind when it's 20 degrees outside, making the tears that are streaming down your face freeze to your cheek, if you can handle that, you can really get a good perspective of the battlefield. And the terrain dictates pretty much everything.
Yes.
I mean, we were just talking about this with Sickles, right? The terrain sucks where he was assigned. And so it makes him want to go to something that looks better.
Yep.
And, so it's very important. And you really get it in the wintertime. Everything is just down to the ground.
Yeah.
There's no tall grass, no corn, nothing.
It was more open then. They needed trees to burn, to heat houses, and to build buildings. One of my favorite spots in the winter, I was there earlier today, the John Byrne statue. Park there and look in the Herbst Woods.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see South McPherson Ridge, and you're like, now that's the way it was. You could see through the trees. You come next month, it's all green, underbrush. You can't see through it. Which
is pretty, but I wish they would, we always joke that they just barbed wire the area off and put a herd of goats in.
Yeah.
And then and you go from the north end of the woods to where that trail that goes to the middle is.
Yes.
You do that section, and then you move the barbed wire and you put the goats on the other section, the south end of the woods from the trail, and then people get to go through, and maybe you do 2 fences of barbed wire so that people can't go and pet the goats or harm them, because there is going to be some jackass that would try to hurt the poor animal.
Yeah.
But Mike, you want to say something?
Yeah, a question to sending reinforcements or sending support to Culp's Hill. Can you talk about what Meade does with the 6th Corps? Is he involved in breaking that up, or what does he do with the 6th Corps in relation?
That's a great question, Mike. Well, we know that the 6th Corps is the last to arrive in the battlefield. So they arrived mid to late afternoon. They marched 34 miles in 18 hours. About 100 of them didn't make it because they died of heat stroke, because the temperature's mid-80s and the heat index is probably mid-90s. So most of those guys weren't really of a lot of use to Meade because they were exhausted. But he did send a significant number of troops over there. And today, if you come through the saddle, you leave Lower Culp's Hill, and you start to come up the upper part of Upper Culp's Hill. And you look on your right at those regimental markers along the tree line where the earthworks are, and you see the stars of the 12th Corps. And then you look on the left side of the road, and you see the Greek cross, because those guys were in those woods. So when the guys on Upper Culp's Hill, the Union guys, mostly 12th Corps in the entrenchments, are pouring that heavy fire into the what we call the saddle, the low ground between Lower and Upper Culp's Hill, they're going to get exhausted. They're going to run out of ammunition. And the 6th Corps just trades places across where the road is today. And the Union maintains a constant fire, which keeps Upper Culp's Hill in Union hands. So, it did use the 6th Corps there. And there were some guys, he fished them out to different parts of the battlefield. But, boy, those guys were in pretty bad shape.
Good question, Michael.
Yeah, really.
Okay, so after Culp's Hill winds down and everything, you mentioned before how he says to Gibbon that the attack would be on your front.
Yeah, I believe the attack's tomorrow,
But then they wake up to Culp's Hill. Does he still think there's going to be attack on the center, or does he think that Culp's Hill was it? Or do we not know?
I don't know. I know, the fighting ends about noon. I think he was expecting an attack in the center at some point. I don't think he thought it was all over. I think he thought, they really haven't tried us in the center yet. And, West Pointer Meade knows what Leah studied, and I think he really believes that Leah is going to make that try on the center. That's my opinion.
When he, I think it's in the Ken Burns documentary where they talk about he's having lunch and a shell cuts an orderly in half as he's serving butter or something like that.
Yeah. In the Leicester house.
Yes, in the Leicester house. So that is true. That's not one of the mistakes of the Ken Burns. Okay.
No,
because he's made some mistakes, so I'm just making sure.
I have always thought that was factual. I don't know.
I have too. I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but I just wanted to clarify that here. Yeah. Okay, so when the bombardment starts, he's having lunch.
I think so.
How dare he eat while a battle is going on? Yeah. Right, Jim?
I don't think that was him. I think that was just his staff.
Oh, it was just his staff.
Yeah.
Okay, good, Eric.
Because Meade's not even at the Leicester house through the bombardment. My understanding is he's at Powers Hill.
Yes.
Well, my understanding was that when that cannonball came in and hit his headquarters, he realized the danger. and
moved.
went to Powers Hill.
Okay.
Retreated for safety. So basically taking himself out of the ball game.
Yes. Well, right, because later on, I'm skipping ahead, but doesn't he come back after Pickett's charge and he's surprised that it's over?
Yeah. That's the scene in the cyclorama. If you look, there's a scene of Meade coming up the hillside from the Tawnytown Road up onto the ridge, and his staff comes down to greet him. Guys at State, how's it going? They're retreating, sir.
Yeah, and you can see him in the painting. He's got the Kevin McAllister face when he puts the aftershave on his cheeks. He's like, yeah.
Who is that? That's Frank Haskell that says that. But Frank Haskell makes some pretty interesting claims.
He does. Yes.
He's
Old Frankie.
Second Corps Artillery Lieutenant.
Yeah,
there's a staff officer.
Staff officer with Hancock.
He was a lieutenant. Yeah, I don't think he was on Hancock's staff. I think
Hayes, wasn't it?
Either Gibbon or Hayes' staff.
Mike Valence, do you remember?
It might be Gibbon.
Gibbon? All right. Mike says Gibbon.
Yeah,
we're going to go with Gibbon.
He had a horse shot out from under him on the 2nd. He had another one shot out from under him on the 3rd. He was the only mounted officer along Cemetery Ridge during the charge. He single-handedly led the Philadelphia Brigade forward. He makes some pretty fanciful claims in his account. And the Philadelphia Brigade after the war, I think in 1910, sought fit to issue a written 60-page book refuting all of his claims.
That's interesting though that
if you read Haskell's account, it isn't just Haskell's account, because Haskell was dead before the war was over. His brother, I guess, was part of the editing process, as it were, and may have added some things after the fact, because it wasn't published until I think the 1890s, 1880s, 1890s.
Yeah, it is Gibbon. He was on Gibbon's staff. Yeah. Do you earlier you got out the Leno book when we were talking about Sickles? Did he actually have troops on Little Round Top?
It doesn't look like he moved any further south than the area where the New Jersey Brigade Monument is.
Okay.
I was going to say
so he didn't even make it to One Shower Hill.
No, it doesn't look like he moved he doesn't look like he moved even close to Munchauer's Knoll until they start advancing, and then they kind of come close to it, but they don't.
Do they have him in there depicted in battle line or in column when he's in that position that you're talking about?
It looks like a column of brigades, but that kind of looks like a battle line too, because it's like your brigade is in line of battle.
Right.
You've got one brigade stacked behind the other.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, so that kind of answers the question, if we're to believe the Leno map, which I have not heard any reason why we shouldn't. So there you go.
Pretty reputable.
All right. So, but during Pickett's charge, though, Meade is not there. Now, you say Powers Hill. I thought he was at Little Round Top. Or was he making the rounds, or was he hunkering? I don't want to say hiding, but hunkering down at Powers Hill?
Yeah, he was there. I think I don't think he returned to Cemetery Ridge until the attack was just ending around 4 o'clock.
Right,
and the bombardment started around 1, so he may have been gone for as much as 2 to 3 hours.
Okay,
makes a temporary headquarters at Powers Hill, which is well out of the range of Confederate cannons.
I'm sure he's on the other side of the hill from where the overshoots would go.
Pretty far
safe.
away.
Yeah.
And we know Granite Schoolhouse Lane was here, so he probably went down the Tawnytown Road, made a left there. That's probably the route he took.
Oh, he didn't just go through Hunt Avenue?
That's what I was thinking. You can't go through where the visitor center was, because that was just all foliage,
Swamp.
Hunt Avenue, I don't think Hunt Avenue existed.
No, it was a joke.
Because it's called an avenue.
Yeah.
The thing is, an avenue was
built by the Park Service.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fantasyland was in the way, though.
Right. Fantasyland.
See, that was the problem. Can you see, gentlemen, who put this here?
So he, okay, so the battle ends. Let's just get to the end of the battle, because this is the controversial part. Okay. We all agree in this room, Meade did a solid job during the battle itself, right, Eric?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Hey,
Lance shaking his head,
okay.
yes?
Yeah.
Well,
that's the bottom line, right?
Exactly. Now, describe the situation for the Army, for Meade personally, on July 4th.
We talked about this last summer. Eric and you and I were on the Sachs Bridge talking about Meade after the battle, and his army was torn up. I think he'd lost like 40% of the officer corps.
Yeah.
Okay. What people don't talk about, they talk about the Confederates not having shoes. Remember we talked about those 30 to 35 mile marches, Gettysburg, the days before the battle?
Yeah.
So they arrive exhausted. They're crossing creeks with leather shoes, and the rock bottoms of the creek are just tearing up the leather. So these guys, their feet are all torn up.
Yep.
Many of them, if they had shoes, they're no good now.
Right.
Lee takes everybody in town and withdraws them up onto Seminary Ridge, where the seminary is. And he takes the guys from Devil's Den, he puts them back up. So he's got a long line along that ridge. It's completely a defensive position. It is an acknowledgement that he has expended his offensive capabilities. And he is just hoping that Meade will make the mistake of attacking across a mile of open fields against black rifle cannon.
Right. Like
and
he
Meade has just
did.
watched the folly of doing that and doesn't fall for it.
Right.
Can we give him a little credit for that?
Yeah.
You know,
I give him a lot of credit for that.
It's kind of
because
like
he was scared.
Yeah. Well, that was it. He was shaking in his shoes and he was thinking, Bobby's going to try me again, and I just don't know if I can take it.
I mean, if you believe Jubal Early, that's
Yeah.
Now, how about Pickett?
How about him?
You know, all these guys are talking to Pickett, and they're saying, well, it was A.P. Hill's fault, it was Longstreet's fault. And Pickett says, well, I think the Yankees might have had something to do with it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we ought to think a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think he's right.
Maybe these Union soldiers rose to the occasion on home soil. Maybe Washington did a good job in picking a Pennsylvanian to command the army that's going to fight on Pennsylvania soil.
That's a good point. And yeah, I mean, like maybe they're doing what we've been doing for the last 2 years and defending their home. And that's why they're fighting better than we did here. Because ultimately for the average Confederate soldier or even the generals themselves, what is the big win if you win at Gettysburg?
Well, you got to win. You've just gone through a series of losses. You can't afford another one, and you sure can't afford one on home soil.
No. I mean, for the Confederates.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the same when you, like, that's what they always say about invading someone else. It's like your heart's just not in it.
Right.
Like we're seeing this in Ukraine now. Everybody's like, Russia's having a hard time.
Well,
because they're defending themselves.
There were accounts of Confederates saying that. Saying, I fought this war to defend our southern soil.
Right.
And I don't know that I have my heart in this. They said that when he invaded Maryland the previous fall.
Didn't a lot stay in Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, Lee's army only had like 45,000 in
There's a pretty good chunk of Lee's army
that did not go into Maryland.
Yeah, this is not what I signed up for.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and that's another thing, too, about Antietam, not to jump all around, but Antietam, it just astonishes me that Lee's army was so small there.
Yeah.
But, they did what they did. That's what you do what you do with, or you do what you can do with what you have. And he did it. So, okay. So, July 4th, Lee's pulled back on the ridge, and Meade's like, I'm not falling for that crap. It's also raining, is it?
Right. I'm glad you mentioned that. Because he sent a reconnaissance on the left from the Little Round Top area toward Devil's Den. The Confederates had evacuated that, and I think they sent a reconnaissance all the way out almost to the Emmitsburg Road to see, what was out there, and the Confederates had actually moved out. But the rain was fouling their pieces, and Meade made the attempt, with a reconnaissance, but realized this is not practical to try to make an offensive movement on the left. And so he'd won the battle, and he held his position, and he waited until the night of the next day, which was ironically the 4th of July. Lee waited for Meade to attack, and then Lee knew he couldn't stay there forever. That Union cavalry had already been sent out into the mountains on July 3rd before the battle was even over. Mm-hmm. They were already pursuing the Confederates, but he didn't follow them.
Yeah. Okay. So that's two other things. They
didn't send a party to the Potomac and burn the bridge there. They didn't do that.
No, they didn't do anything like that.
No.
So you mentioned shoes. Mm-hmm. How about horses and food?
Yeah, the horses, my gosh, Meade is sending messages to Washington about give us as many horses as you possibly can. And I just challenge anybody, we talked about this before, to go down Route 15 and turn right and go up into that Catoctin Mountain north of Frederick and see those gravel roads. And imagine that it's pouring down rain.
Yep.
And you're barefooted and you haven't had a decent meal. And all Washington can say is you're not pursuing them.
Yeah. No, it's crazy.
I get frustrated, man.
I mean, I get tired, going through Monterey Pass in an automobile. It just that climb, I can't imagine. It's not a paved road. Horses are plumb tuckered out, and the men are tuckered out. But you need horses because your cavalry's out there first. And who's pulling your wagons? Who's pulling your artillery? Horses. So you need the horses. And if Eric, didn't you say that you read somewhere that they during the Gettysburg campaign they refitted
requisitions 30 through? I think it's the Ordnance Department dealt with horses, but the requisitions were basically to remount the entire federal cavalry corps 3 times through the course of the campaign.
Right, like 30,000.
From the beginning of June through the end of July.
Is this foraged that's being sent to them from Washington?
No, this is new horses.
New horses.
Yeah. They basically requisitioned enough horses to remount the entire cavalry corps 3 times.
Wow. And think about Lee's army, what his horses are doing to the ground. That's why you can't stay in that one position forever. Because they're going to consume all that stuff.
Yep.
And, if you wait too long, the Union Army is going to get on your supply line.
Well, that's another thing that you just got me thinking of is if you're pursuing the Confederates on the same roads, they've torn those roads up.
Sure.
Prior to you.
I didn't even think about that.
I never did either until you just said that. But something made me realize, wait a second, they're messing up those roads first.
One of your listeners posed a question about Meade's pursuit and logistics, and it's a really good question, and I'm looking forward to.
All right, we'll get to that in a second. But now, how about the other thing that I mentioned was food? I'm under the impression that for the bulk of the battle, I don't remember how much of the battle, but for the most of the 3 days, if you didn't have something in your haversack to eat when you got there, prior to getting there, you probably weren't going to be eating much during the 3 days of the battle. Is that accurate? I think I read that in Coddington, if I'm not mistaken.
And, they ordered the men to fix 3 days' rations on June 28th. When the Army is at Frederick and Meade's taking command. 3 days later, what is that?
Yeah, July 1st.
Right, exactly. See my point?
Yeah.
By now, you're out of food.
Right.
You have you have some parts of at least the First Corps that are getting rations issued on the 30th, like Stone's Brigade. Stone's Brigade, the 143rd and 149th PA get rations on the 30th. The 150th didn't for some inexplicable reason. But that's not a trivial consideration.
No.
Right?
It's not.
If you look at the precedents, the order of precedents for supply trains that are allowed to come to Gettysburg, commissary department's way second to last.
So, yes.
Right? The Ordnance Department gets absolute top priority because it doesn't matter if you've been fed or clothed. If you don't have bullets to sling, you're useless.
Right.
And then the medical department has to kind of beg and plead to be allowed to send medical supplies up. And I don't think they're given that go-ahead until the evening of July 2nd. Right? The commissary department's not allowed to come forward until July 4th.
Yeah.
Right? So these dudes have definitely not been issued rations between at least July 1st.
Right.
Mostly July 30th at the most recent, until the 4th. And you fought for 3 days.
Right.
Not only fought, but you marched for 3 days.
And you sat under the blazing sun and sweated.
Yeah,
it's all exhausting.
Yeah, well, why didn't he pursue? He could have crushed him. How do you expect men to do that haven't eaten or slept for days?
And you know how exhausted...
People don't think about that stuff.
No, they don't.
Absolutely not.
But you know what's funny is the people that criticize them and they go, oh, well, come on. They're young men. They could have gone 3 days without food. Those are the people that can't go 2 hours in the middle of the afternoon without a snack.
I haven't eaten yet today, and I'm I don't want to do anything.
I know. I haven't had anything since lunch, and it was a pretty light lunch, and I'm dying to eat right now.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to get cranky. But, I can't imagine. And how about this? You go to the beach and you sit out in the sun all day. You don't do anything. You sit in the sun all day. And don't you come back feeling leached? Don't you feel exhausted?
Oh, yeah.
Now, add a battle to that, the terror of that. Add the marching that you had to do to get to the battle. And now you got this. Come on. I know they're young. And young men can do a lot that older men can't do, but please, they're human beings.
I was in the Army in my 20s, and I couldn't have gone 4 days without food.
There you go.
But that's not going to happen, man.
No. So it's amazing to me that, like half of the casualties or half of the deaths from, in the Army of the Potomac weren't people just dying. Just flat out dying.
About 100 men of the 6th Corps died just trying to get here.
Right.
Think about Meade, somewhere outside Frederick, going over that mountain trying to intercept the Confederates, down around Williamsport in the Potomac River. And he's getting messages from Washington saying, make your men make forced marches. And he's going, forced? What do you think we're doing? In the rain and the pouring. And we haven't eaten in days. It's no wonder he offered to resign at that point.
Yeah.
If you don't think I'm doing the job, go ahead and fire the next Army of the commander, Potomac commander that you've done for every battle in the East, including one guy you brought back and fired a second time. So if you don't think I'm doing the job, fine. But then don't wonder why things aren't going your way.
Yeah, the poor man, and it's funny, like you look at pictures of him and he just looks haggard, And you look at those pictures, you're like, man, this poor old man. He was only 20, ladies and gentlemen. No, he wasn't 20.
No, he wasn't.
What was he, 47?
Yes, he was
47 years old. But still, he looks like he's 57 in those pictures of him. He doesn't look...
Yeah. He's got the sagging eyes. And
he's got the bags and, the hair and just he's gray. And,
think of the responsibility.
That's what I'm saying.
And in 3 days, he wins the battle.
He wins the battle, and he doesn't get removed. And I think, to me, the clearest evidence that he did well here is that he didn't get removed. Because even if you look at like the stuff that they're saying about him in the Committee for the Conduct of the War, or on the Conduct of the War, or whatever it is, they're ripping him apart, a lot of these guys. But still, he's not removed. Nothing gets in the way. He's there till the surrender in the command of the Army of the Potomac, which no previous general could say.
There were quotes by 3 pretty highly respected generals when Grant came east in March of '64, took command. Normally, he would sit in Washington in the War Department, issue orders. That's what Halleck, his predecessor, did. That's what happened during the Gettysburg campaign. And Grant chooses to get in between the Army of the Potomac and Washington. But by his rank, he supersedes Meade. But he met with Meade right before, I think, the Battle of Wilderness. And he'd heard all this stuff about Meade and gotten an unfavorable impression. And when Meade met Grant, he said, I know you've heard some negative things about me, and I'd be happy to get out of your way and resign if you want me to. And Grant was taken aback. He couldn't believe it. And it's not what he expected. It's not what he heard. And he said, no, I want you to stay here. I want you to stay. And the other thing, the other guy whose opinion I think ought to be taken into account regarding Meade was his adversary, Robert E. Lee.
Yeah.
Before the battle, when Lee finds out that Meade's in command, Meade... Pennsylvania man, he'll be cautious. He will be slow to make a mistake in my front and quick to take advantage if I make one in his.
Right.
That's Lee before the battle. After the battle, after the war, at the end of the war at Appomattox, Meade asked for permission to go through the lines after Grant and Lee had met, and he wants to meet with Lee, and he gets permission. And they talk about the fact that they'd served in the Mexican War together, and Meade looks at Robert E. Lee and says, I don't remember you being quite so gray. And Lee looked back at him and said, you have to answer for that.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that's a pretty good source.
I agree. That is that's you got Grant and Lee both giving him pretty good credit. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good source for sure. All right, so now if you want to get into, or if you want to hear the rest of the Gettysburg campaign, we had Jim on back over the anniversary days, and we talked about the retreat and all that stuff. And so if you want to get more into that, you can go and find that episode from, I think that came out on July 4th, if I'm not mistaken, right, Eric? That sounds about right. 4th or 5th.
Or the 5th.
But just go back to July and you'll find it. But for now, that's where we're going to end the background portion here. We're going to take a quick break and come back with our patrons' questions. Don't forget, you got to be a patron to send in a question. Patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg. We'll be right back.
What do Getty's Bike Tours customers say?
Very family friendly. We had a wonderful time with our son.
Me and my friends were able to rent these bikes and go at our own pace, So we were able to just do what we wanted to do when we wanted to do it, and I highly recommend it to anybody else.
It seemed like the right way to go to view the wonderful sights and also get an incredible amount of history from Bob.
Our tour guide Bruce was so knowledgeable about the facts and the history of these battlefields that I came away with an understanding that was unmatched by any other means.
The breeze on the battlefield made up for the hot day.
I had a wonderful time, great trip, lots of history, wonderful bike ride, perfect weather. Could have asked for a nicer day. Highly recommend it.
If you're going to tour Gettysburg, I would recommend doing it on the bike. It's a lot of fun.
I loved it. It was awesome.
We really couldn't stump the professor with any of our questions, so we thought it was really well worth it.
It was an excellent day out and got you outside and experienced the weather. Beautiful weather out here today.
We had a lot of fun. If you're thinking about it, I'd just say give it a shot. It was awesome for us. I hope it's awesome for you guys too.
Go to gettysbike.com or call 717-752-7752 to book a battlefield experience you will never forget.
You've heard us promote various ways that you can help us keep the show going. But one way we haven't pushed too much yet is our sutlery at addressinggettysburg.com/shop. And that's a shame, because we have designs over there by talented artists like Ty DeWitt of 1863 Designs and Mike Stretch of the Heritage Depot. So now we're promoting it. Buying shirts, hoodies, mugs, and other items from our sutlery not only helps us keep the lights on, but it also helps guys like Ty and Mike, and it helps spread the word about the show every time you wear an item or sip from your mug. So please, head over to addressinggettysburg.com/shop and grab some merch. You just might find the perfect Christmas gift for the Gettys nerd in your family. That's addressinggettysburg.com/shop. Our favorite bookstore in Gettysburg is For the Historian, located at 42 York Street. It's because they have the best selection of Civil War books in Gettysburg, both new and used. And online, they have even more to choose from. And if the Civil War isn't your thing, that's not a problem. This is For the Historian, after all. They cover history from the ancient world to the 21st century with a strong selection of World War II and American Revolution books. It's astounding how many thousands of titles from Osprey, Savas Beatty, UNC Press, and more they have in their store. And that's because, well, they have a warehouse too. And that's where they keep all the books that are available online at forthehistorian.com. And folks, if you go to forthehistorian.com now and order books until you're blue in the face, be sure you mention that you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg in the Note to Seller box, and they will refund your shipping costs. And if you prefer to stop by when you're in town, well, you could do that too. Just mention Addressing Gettysburg at checkout, and they'll take 20% off the retail price of your item. So go to forthehistorian.com or stop by 42 York Street, or you can call them at 717-685-5207. That's forthehistorian.com or 717-685-5207.
You're listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast with Matt Callery.
All right, and we're back, and we're going to get to our questions now from our audience. And ladies and gentlemen, don't forget that we take questions from our patrons. That's just one of the many perks that you get being a patron over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. And we'll start off tonight with Brian Durenick, and he says, it's been said that Lincoln first offered command of the Army of the Potomac to John Reynolds, and he declined. Is there any indication who Lincoln may have next offered command to if Meade similarly declined? Well, I think when we were talking about, when he got the word, he pretty much answered that question there. Go ahead.
Right. He wasn't given a choice.
Right.
With Confederates in Pennsylvania, the crisis at a head, Reynolds had turned the command down a month before, just about the time Lee was just starting to leave Fredericksburg and come up here. And now it's, the collision is imminent, and Washington's not in a mood, or Lincoln's not in a mood to dicker with generals who don't know whether they want to command or not. So he's just told, you're in charge. You're putting command of the Army of the Potomac. They're out there. Go get them. Stay between Baltimore and Washington.
These are your orders, soldier. Follow them.
Exactly. And that's what Meade said. He said, I didn't ask for this command, but I was ordered to take it. I'll do the best I can.
Mm-hmm. And then he has another question. Can you comment on how Meade addressed the logistical issues of resupplying the Army after the battle to allow for the start of the pursuit of the Army of Northern Virginia after its retreat?
I love Brian's question. I think this is great. What Meade chose to do, he could have gone directly after Lee toward the mountains. And you would have gotten bogged down in the mountains, and you would have been nipping at his heels. But what Meade chooses to do after the battle is what he chose to do before the battle. Move forward on this side of the Blue Ridge Mountains, parallel to Lee. So now in the retreat, he's going to stay on this side of the mountains. And here's the real advantage to that. You move south to Frederick, and then you can cross the mountains and try to intercept the Lee of the Potomac River. But Westminster, Maryland, 25 miles southeast of Gettysburg, halfway between here and Baltimore, is the closest railhead for supplies. If you move toward the Blue Ridge Mountains, you're moving away from the supplies. If you move to Frederick, Maryland, south, there's a train that comes from Westminster, which is the supply depot. So when you're moving to Frederick, you're actually moving closer to your supplies.
Right.
Before you take on Lee at the Potomac River.
Yeah. Brian from Cleveland, he says, when Meade takes over the Army of the Potomac, who selects his replacement, then that man's replacement, and so on all the way down the line? Also, how many changes were there? I think it means officers and whatnot.
That's the one question I looked at last night that you sent me, Matt, that I had to go do the homework on.
Okay.
And, I pulled out the order of battle from the OR for Chancellorsville, to kind of see where these guys were, and then compared it to Gettysburg. Here's the situation. We talked about it earlier. At Chancellorsville, they have 3 grand divisions.
Okay.
So Sykes, General Sykes, George Sykes, was the commander of the 5th Corps, and Meade was a division, what do they call it?
The Grand Division Commander?
Yeah, Grand Division, Central.
Yeah.
So I had 3 corps underneath them. So they got rid of that after the Battle of Gettysburg. So Meade goes back to command of the 5th Corps, and Sykes goes back to command of the 2nd Division of the 5th Corps. And then when the battle, Meade gets appointed to command, Sykes then moves back into the command of the 5th Corps. And Romaine Ayres, who had been captain in the U.S. Regular Artillery, is given command of 2nd Division, 5th Corps Infantry. So other than that, because Sykes had been a 5th Corps commander before, and they just had that Grand Division thing, and they changed it. There really wasn't a lot of change in the brigade commanders below that. It's just Sykes moves up to 5th Corps Command, and Romaine Ayres from the U.S. Regulars Artillery takes
moved over to artillery.
Right.
So he's due to command infantry-wise.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Now, apparently, from what I saw, Ayres had commanded infantry before.
Oh, okay.
But there was a lot of activity in April where he was suddenly transferred over to artillery for whatever reason, and then back to infantry again when Meade takes.
And so when he was over at artillery, what was his rank?
Captain.
And then
remember, Matt, it's hard to advance in the artillery.
Yeah.
You can be a battalion commander of 16 guys, you're only a freaking colonel.
Yeah, right. So then he moves over to infantry and is bumped up to general?
I don't know about that. I don't know what his rank.
But he's a division commander, so he's not going to be a captain.
He almost has to be.
Yeah.
But you know that there were some guys who commanded certain levels of organization that weren't the approximate rank. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I'm talking about Vincent.
Yeah.
Vincent's a colonel. He's commanding a brigade.
Sure.
They just haven't acted on it.
And there were regiments commanded by captains. And yeah.
And Meade was given this authority to suddenly promote people.
Romaine Ayres was promoted to brigadier general November 29th, 1862.
Okay.
As chief of artillery for the 6th Corps.
Okay. 6th Corps. Okay, thank you.
And then he moves over to brigade command in the regulars April of 63.
Okay. And then...
But he was in artillery, right?
Yeah, he was an artillery officer.
Yeah.
And so
high rank.
He doesn't take command of an infantry unit until April of 63.
Yeah.
So it's an infantry brigade, not an artillery brigade.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But then he's back in infantry right before Gettysburg with the 2nd Division of the 5th Corps, right?
Yeah, and that's the brigade he takes command of in April.
Okay.
All right, got it. So he moves up from brigade command when Sykes moves up to corps.
He moves up to division command.
I'm sorry, division, because he's one of the division. Okay, the brigade command. Yeah, all right, got it. Okay, good. All right. And then Brian from Cleveland says, P.S. I just received my Addressing Gettysburg t-shirt, and I love it. All right, very good there, Brian. Thank you very much.
There's an Addressing Gettysburg t-shirt?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I got to see this.
Yeah, you know what I got to do is I'm just going to have to get some.
You just got to go to addressinggettysburg.com.
Okay.
/shop.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. addressinggettysburg.com /shop.
Yeah.
This isn't commercial here.
I actually intend to get a bunch of them to give to you guys for doing the show on a regular basis for us. So
you don't have to, but if you do, I won't complain.
I know. Nobody complains about a free T-shirt.
No, I think it would be cool.
Yeah. Once I find out just how much of a huge tax bill I have this year, after that I will purchase them.
Look like this with the soldier with the rifle on your front of your computer.
Well, there's a whole bunch. There's different ones, but the basic one is this one here. Yeah,
so cool.
All of these are on a T-shirt.
I love
all these, like even Tim Smith Cool. Would you like a Tim Smith Cool T-shirt?
Tim Smith, oh my gosh!
Yeah, he has a catchphrase.
Tim Smith, I can't believe it. Cool.
He's got a Cool is his catchphrase. That's his way of saying, I think you're an idiot, but I don't want to be rude. So he'll just go, cool.
He does it to me all the time.
Yes, he does. And that's where we started noticing it. He would do that. Okay, so let me see. Where am I? Actually, you want to hear what Tim sounds like?
Cool.
That was him. Did you hear that? Oh, God. What was that?
Make that stop.
Cool.
Jeez, okay, we'll stop that. All right, so let's see. Next question here. Joe Jacobs. What was the best thing General Meade did after taking command? Also, what was the worst thing he did after taking command? Thank you for your time. Hope you're enjoying the new studio.
Well, I saw that question last night. It really made me think. What did the best thing he did after taking command? I think probably when he went to Hooker and got a pretty good idea of where all the corps were positioned, and then gave the men rest on the 28th when he took command, and began to plot the routes to Pennsylvania to intercept the Confederates. He moved quickly to intercept them. The worst thing he did, boy, I don't know. I'm sure I thought of something the other night, but I can't think of it.
He kept Dan Butterfield as his chief of staff.
That's
a bad one.
No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Nice.
The thing is, I don't blame him for doing that, but that's the closest thing I can say.
I mean, when you can't find anybody else to take the job.
Right, yeah. But after the Gettysburg campaign is over, does he keep Dan Butterfield for long? No.
He replaces him with Humphreys.
Right. So he kind of had no choice after taking
command. It was
command.
too close to the battle, and it would have just disrupted things too much.
Yeah.
So you kind of stuck with him for the battle.
Yeah.
We're talking about Butterfield.
Dan Butterfield, yeah. All right, Richard Snyder says, hello, Matt. Oh, how I wish I could be there to listen to this being recorded. General George Gordon Meade is my all-time favorite commander of the Army of the Potomac, and I really enjoy your segments with Jim Pangburn. There you go, Jim.
Thank you, Richard. I sure appreciate that.
Here are my questions. Does Jim believe that the resignation of General Darius Couch or Darius Couch from command of the 2nd Corps of the Army of the Potomac after Chancellorsville had anything to do with Lincoln and Halleck's decision to accept Hooker's resignation?
I sure do.
You do? Okay.
Couch was highly regarded as a 2nd Corps commander at Chancellorsville. And when somebody like that says, I can't work under this man, and then voluntarily, pulls himself out and could have wrecked his career. They appointed him to command of the Department of the Susquehanna, the eastern part of Pennsylvania during the invasion. He was headquartered in Harrisburg. But Couch was a guy that they had a lot of respect for. And so when somebody like him takes that kind of drastic action, I think it got Washington's attention.
So when Meade is told that he's taking command, the courier, Colonel Hardy, goes to him first and not Hooker.
Right.
Is that abnormal?
I feel like that was kind of a way of hedging their bets. I feel like because they gave Meade the option, you either take command of the Army or you resign, period.
Right.
Is the way I always understood that. So what happens if Meade resigns but you've already relieved Hooker?
Right.
Now you're stuck.
Right. So wait, where did he
go? Make sure Meade's going to take the job first instead of just walking away from the Army before you go fire Hooker. Who's not going to be particularly pleased if you have to go back to him and say, hey, sorry about that. We kind of jumped the gun a bit.
Yeah. Because he'd tell you to go pound sand.
Yeah. I think they were concerned about what Hooker's response might be. So if Meade shows up and they've already, told him that he's going to be in command, it's kind of difficult for Howard or Hooker to do anything. But from what I understand, he was pretty good with Meade. Took the time to explain to him everything he needed to know. I mean, I think Hooker was concerned about the Army and the condition of the Army. I mean, his problem was with Washington. So I think he had a vested interest in, seeing that Meade had a smooth transfer. And apparently Hooker must have respected Meade somewhat himself.
Well, yeah, from what I seem to remember reading about it is that he kind of diffused the tension of the moment with his usual sense of humor and good cheer and all that stuff. I'm sure he was also kind of happy. I mean, he already resigned, so, it's all a relief and a big load off of his shoulders, I'm sure. So it's probably easier for him he probably was happy.
I guess he was certainly relieved, Matt.
Yeah.
I think he was certainly relieved. I think the pressure is really getting to Hooker.
I would think so. I mean, I kind of feel bad for the guy. I'm not a big Hooker fan, but when I read about, everything that he tried to do to save the country, right, to comply with Washington and do, what they're asking him to do, and they said no. Just flat out no most of the time. Yeah. And it's like, well, how do you expect me to do what you want me to do if I can't do this or I can't do that? So I totally feel bad for the guy, and I understand.
But he dug his own grave.
But exactly.
And one of the interesting things is, and we touched on this before, is, and a lot of times you read about this stuff, and you, in your mind, you gloss over certain little things that you don't think are important, and you think about other things. And it kind of happened to me when I was reading for how many times about, when Hardee came to Meade's headquarters and told him he was in command. Hardee goes with Meade to Hooker's headquarters. And he sits there and he watches this. And as soon as it's over, he gets on the telegraph. They're really anxious in Washington to see how it goes. Yeah. How does Hooker handle this? Does he leave Meade not, get impetuous and say, well, go screw you, I'll see you later? No, he meets with Meade and he tells him exactly where the Corps are, and he got a little ticked off when Meade said, well, I seem they're a little spaced out there. And what do you mean spaced? But they got over it quickly. Right. And both of them got down to business, and they did what was right for the country. I think that's what happened. I think Meade and Hooker did what was right for the country at a critical time.
Yeah, maybe we don't, you don't hear that too much, but I think you're right. Like, they just had a sense of duty, and this was an emergency situation, and there was no time for egos. And so Hooker probably just, grew up. Yeah. And said, well, this is for the better of all. So
let's give him credit for
that. Yeah. What was the opinion of most of the Army of the Potomac commanders about Meade? We kind of touched on that before.
We did touch on that.
Generally respected.
I think so, yeah. I think he was respected to, admired. I think he was trusted. Oh, gosh.
Is that you?
Yes, Howie Frankenfield. Telling me where we're going to eat on Wednesday night. He'll leave a message.
Okay.
Sorry about that, guys.
It's all right. We'll just wait.
Okay. About 3, 2, 1.
Well, then I'll just dip out now.
What?
You're going to have to cut that out, right?
No, I was going to leave it.
Oh. Well,
but I'll mark it just in case.
Well,
you got to go eat?
I got to eat, and I got a lot of work to catch up.
All right, go ahead, Eric. Go ahead. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Eric. Good seeing you again, man.
Good seeing you, Jim.
Yeah, likewise. Always fun.
All right, so let's see here. Oh, Lincoln was very critical of Meade after the Battle of Gettysburg. Did Lincoln eventually soften his view of the battle and of Meade?
Yeah, he did. We talked about this last summer, Matt, and when we talked about, Meade after the battle and the pursuit and everything. Lincoln had written a letter that he was going to send to Meade explaining to him his disappointment and why he was disappointed and how all he had to do was reach out his hand and he could capture the Confederates, and then he never sent it. And I guess he learned more as time went on, about the situation. I don't think he ever fully got over the fact that the war didn't end there, but I just don't think he ever fully understood the situation. Yeah. That Meade had done a great thing, but what you were asking for, what you were hoping for, especially in the light of Grant capturing Vicksburg at the same time, it just wasn't that practical.
Yeah. There's that famous story about the letter that Lincoln writes to Meade but never sends. And I always say that, I've said this before on the show, I always think that's such a great lesson for all of us with this email shut. Like,
yes.
Before you go blast it away at
Sleep
someone,
on it.
Go ahead and write it, but don't send it. Save it as a draft. Yeah. And sleep on it. Yeah. And you'll find that you're probably glad that you would do that. But tell that story for people who haven't heard it before.
There'd been a lot of communication between Washington and Meade, and they just didn't feel like, July 7th, 8th, 9th, that Meade was really pushing the Army. And like I said, he just wasn't there to see the condition of Meade's Army. That's why Meade got so mad when they said, make your men make forced marches. And Meade just throws this, what are we doing if this is not forced marches in driving rain with no food? And finally he said, look, if you don't think I'm doing the job. And then all of a sudden Halleck shot back and said, oh, no.
Yeah.
You've done the country a great service. We just think we have a great opportunity here. Well, you're not there.
Right.
You don't see the situation.
You do have a great opportunity, but it's just not plausible. We can't take the opportunity.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, God, it's so frustrating, right? You hear about this stuff? And you just put yourself in his shoes. Yeah. But, also put yourself in their shoes. Put yourself in Lincoln's shoes, Halleck's shoes. They don't know exactly what's going on. They're not on the ground, and they're nervous because they've got their shit that they have to worry about. The public, Lincoln's got to worry about the public.
He's got to answer to the country.
Yeah.
He calls it the country. What will the country say?
Exactly. So he's got to worry about them. Halleck's got to worry about Lincoln keeping his job so he could keep his job probably or something like that, right? And so there's a lot riding on this for everyone.
Yeah.
And not everyone is privy to what the other people are privy to. And so Lincoln and those guys in Washington, they have no idea what's going on in Gettysburg with the Army of the Potomac, and the Army of the Potomac, Meade, and they have no idea what's going on in Washington and what their concerns are. Everybody only knows what's right in front of them. And so I feel bad for all of them all around. I mean, it had to be a very nail-biting couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, Vicksburg has fallen. And Lincoln is thinking, finally, this is it. The people of the North are tired of the war. And we know what happened after Gettysburg. People aren't volunteering anymore. The Gettysburg Army, other than U.S. regulars, they're volunteers. Mm-hmm. Okay, now that's drying up. People are looking at the casualties and going, I'm not going into this. You kidding me? And they institute the draft the same month as the Battle of Gettysburg, and riots break out in New York City.
Yeah.
And now Lincoln has to come to Gettysburg to address why we need to continue the war, as they call it, the unfinished work. To keep people on track for continuing the war and sacrifices, the casualties that are going to come. Mm-hmm. But you know what? It worked.
Yeah.
He convinced them. And they did. But he just thought, at that point, Lee knew that the people of the North were tired of the war. They'd lost battles. But here's the thing about Gettysburg. It's a turning point. And maybe the war goes on, but now you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now Grant comes east, and they're winning battles. And you can see Lee retreating, and you can see the light. And now you know there is an end to the war. But up at this point, up to Gettysburg, it just didn't look good at all. And Lincoln thought, man, we're so close. This could be it. We could finally crush them. But it just wasn't practical. Like you said, Matt, he wasn't here to see the condition.
Yeah.
And Meade was, and they should have probably trusted General Meade. But they'd been disappointed by so many generals before. And so they were conditioned to expect the least. Oh, Meade is just, he doesn't have the heart. When are they going to realize, when Meade says they're going to drive the invader from our soil? When are they going to realize it's all our soil?
Right.
Why don't you give the man a break?
Yeah. That's a good point. I agree. Charles Fuller says, describe Meade at Chancellorsville as a corps commander. Was his corps materially involved in any way in that battle? And as a follow-up, in what ways did Meade's Chancellorsville involvement, or lack thereof, perhaps influence the perception of him as a leading choice for Army commander? And Mike Lentz, your microphone is open, so step in anytime you feel the need.
Okay, certainly. So,
well, no, I would let him answer.
No, I was kind of hoping he would say something.
Okay,
go ahead, Mike.
Well, I mean, the Fifth Corps is not significantly engaged, and Meade, again, he's going off of the reputation that he has as a division commander, commanding the Pennsylvania Reserves. He handles his corps well at Chancellorsville, and if you look at in relation to everybody else, especially Howard, it's really. He comes out looking better than most, but it's still not positive. The overall criticism here goes to the Council of War that Hooker has about ordering potentially the retreat. And this is where you get a lot of that sticky kind of situation with Sickles initially, is this what was Meade supporting in that particular meeting. And so... yeah, it's an interesting thing, but he comes out looking pretty good, but not everybody looks good coming out of Chancellorsville.
if you know the Battle of Chancellorsville, you know that the Confederates were on Marie's Heights in the city of Fredericksburg, and the Union armies across the Rappahannock River. And what Hooker did is he moved north of the river and got behind Lee. So Lee was suddenly stuck between the 6th Corps opposite Fredericksburg, and now to the west, you have Hooker's main part of the army. And at that point, it looked bad for Lee. What are you going to do? You're at a disadvantage. You're kind of stuck between two Union forces, and you retreat to Richmond. But Lee turns, and he goes towards Chancellorsville to the west, away from Fredericksburg, to take on Hooker, which Hooker did not expect. And Meade's division had been above the Rappahannock River, and had crossed and was kind of in a position north, kind of between where Lee was and Fredericksburg. And so he was in kind of a position to follow Lee toward Chancellorsville, kind of put Lee in a vice. And that's why I said earlier, if Meade had done that, I don't know that Lee would have been able to disengage Jackson, to make the flank attack.
That's a good point. That's exactly a good point.
Well, Meade himself, that's what frustrated him.
Yeah.
He's just sitting there and he's going, why aren't I getting orders to do this? Because Hooker's sitting in his headquarters, shaking his, can't even think, I don't think.
Right.
At that point.
And after the battle, right, who comes down to talk to the two most senior Pennsylvanians? John Reynolds and George Meade, but Governor Curtin.
Right.
There's this meeting between them, right?
Yes.
Now, John Reynolds is smart. He doesn't give the full truth of what he thinks. But Meade makes a massive mistake, which is he tells a politician exactly what he thinks. and he's absolutely honest.
And you're talking about his opinion of Hooker.
And Hooker's handling of Chancellorsville.
Right.
And it goes partially back to that.
And Curtin goes running to Lincoln after that, doesn't he? Like panicking?
Oh, yeah. Telling anyone who's willing to listen, look, Hooker has lost the confidence of his corps commanders. And it's interesting because Meade will write to his wife that he's frustrated, that initially he was really happy that they got into the rear of Lee. That's like, yes, we've done this. This is great. And then they stop. And this is what makes me just irate, that there was a missed opportunity.
That's it.
Tim Matthews says, Matt, I would like to hear more about how Meade used reinforcements and how effective that was. Also, more about Meade's location during each day and his level of involvement in the operational decisions each day. So that second part we went into extensively earlier. But we kind of touched on the reinforcements with the 6th Corps and everything like that. But go ahead if you want to go a little more into how he used reinforcements and how effective.
That's what I was talking about when I was talking about how he chose to retreat south toward Frederick on this side of the mountains rather than pursue Lee directly into the mountains. He's moving more toward his supply line at Westminster because there's a railroad from Westminster, which is kind of right between Baltimore and Gettysburg, and also is a connection to Washington, D.C. by rail. So by going to Frederick, those supply trains are coming to Westminster. It's a very short ride. When you get to Westminster, as you're heading south, parallel to the Confederates trying to cut them off, you're getting supplied. As opposed to following the Confederates in the mountains, you're moving further away from your supply line.
And he knows that Lee is going to try to go back into Virginia. He's not trying to go further west into Pennsylvania. No. He's going to cut down and try to cross the Potomac again.
Right.
So to go to Frederick makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. One of those would be that, he's trying to kind of head Lee off at the pass or at least corner him or something like that, but you're not going to go right after the guy. You're going to try to swoop around.
Well, he sent Sedgwick toward Fairfield.
Right.
And Gordon's brigade of Early's division of Ewell's corps turned on him. Set up artillery on a ridge outside Fairfield, and Sedgwick sent the word back, hey, these guys are ready for a bit of they're not in the condition that you may think. They're ready for a fight. And going into these foggy mountains, that's exactly what Lee wanted him to do with the whole battle. So that's when Sedgwick then turned south and headed toward Emmitsburg. And then that's when Meade realized, no, we can't pursue them, and we know for a fact that they are indeed going into mountains. Meade was concerned that if he started to go south too soon to Frederick, Lee could stop and turn around and come back toward Gettysburg, and then all of a sudden Baltimore, Washington.
Right.
So you got to be sure that they are actually retreating. And once he found that out, then he could give the go-ahead to start moving south toward Emmitsburg and down toward Frederick.
All right. And then the one and only 6 questions Lentz, ladies and gentlemen, has submitted 6 questions. I think we might have touched on a few of them, but Mike, I'm going to let you ask these questions to Jim, and you take out whichever ones that we've already covered.
Sounds good. Most of them have already been answered, so that's good for the audience out here. All right. Jim, could you give a brief summary of the history of the political intrigue and the command structure of the Army of the Potomac, specifically the intrigue surrounding Hooker and Burnside when they were commanders of the Army of the Potomac?
Okay, so Burnside was the commander. He had relieved McClellan in early November, right after the Antietam campaign, when Lincoln was so upset with McClellan for not pursuing. Have you heard this before? The Confederates after the Battle of Antietam. And so they replaced him with Burnside. And Burnside was kind of an honest guy, really almost to his detriment. He said some things that were somewhat self-deprecating, and I think that caused him to have some of the other generals lose confidence in him. But, he tried. You know what he tried? He tried what Hooker did in May of 1863 and January of 1863. Go out, cross the river, get behind Lee. Only problem is he did it in January. And he got caught in what we call the Mud March. It just bogged down. Right. So Hooker, the genius, is only doing what the man he criticizes, Burnside, thank you, had demonstrated before, but only in better weather. So, we had the Democrats, we had Butterfield, we had Hooker, and we had Sickles. There was a cabal there, and they were plotting. And, they plotted against Burnside. And Hooker, right after the Mud March in January, Hooker replaced Burnside. And when Lincoln put Hooker in command, he said, I'm well aware that there's been political intrigue and backstabbing, and you've been part of it. He said, now you're in command. Now you need to watch that.
Right.
Because don't think they're not going to do it to you too, and don't think that maybe you don't deserve it. So that's pretty much what was going on, and I think that's one of the things that probably contributed to Washington just not being confident in Hooker and looking. But like Robert E. Lee said about his men, there've never been such men in an army before. They will go anywhere and do anything if properly led. But that's the problem. Where do we find the leaders, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's happening in the Northern Army a little bit.
Right.
Sure.
And so Hooker then, after Chancellorsville, does he accept responsibility for the defeat, or what does he do? Does he try to pass the buck?
I think he did take responsibility. I think he said something along the lines of, my greatest enemy at maybe not the exact words, but at Chancellorsville was
Joe Hooker. And didn't he also didn't he refer to it as a setback or something like that? Was it a setback, Mike?
Somewhat like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he really downplayed the horrendous failure that it was. He was like, well, we had a minor setback.
Well, he drank.
Yeah. Yes.
And I don't know whether that had anything to do with. Maybe it was a combination of things. Lee's audacity they didn't expect. He thought he had Lee when he came in his rear, and that was it. And Lee had the audacity not to retreat, but actually turn on him. Holy smokes. And then he's standing on that porch at Chancellorsville, and that cannonball comes in, and that stuns him. And maybe he'd had something to drink, or maybe he hadn't had something to drink. If he's an alcoholic and he hadn't had something to drink, maybe he's not functioning at the best.
Right.
So, Joe Hooker might have been, I'll give him credit for that. He's starting to sound more like a Meade in that sense. But, I just
don't take in saying that Joe Hooker was...
Yeah. Now all of a sudden he's humbled.
Right.
Now all of a sudden he's a slightly different man.
Because, it's always easy if you're second fiddle to pick on the guy who's first fiddle, but the minute you become first fiddle, now all of a sudden he's like, oh, wait, I'm a human being too, and I'm making some mistakes just like he was. It's not so easy being at the top.
People, are you listening to this? You're the guy that backstabs your superior, okay? You get the job, and this is what happens to you. And then you have General Meade, who's like, I didn't seek this. I wasn't looking for it. I'm an officer. All at West Point. It's my duty. I'm going to do the best I can. Wins the Battle of Gettysburg. Yeah. There's a lesson there.
There is a lesson there.
You think about what you do.
That's right. It's true. Shut your mouth, keep your head down, and do your job, right?
Yeah.
And even more to the point of with that dysfunction within the Army of the Potomac, did Meade participate in any of that? Was he active in backstabbing or anything like that?
I think you know the answer to that. I think you know that he did not. And I think you know that that's one of the reasons why they were looking at him as that good candidate, because he's not one of the politicians. And we've seen what happened with the Army when that's going on. We need a guy who's just going to do the job, and that's Meade. And he gets the command.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've already covered that he had the confidence of his colleagues, but he wasn't the most senior of the major generals who were in the Army of the Potomac at the time. Can you explain a little bit that seniority process? What was that like in the Army at the time?
Well, generally, senior commanders, guys who've been in that particular rank the longest, have the seniority. And usually, they're going to get the promotions first. But Washington realized that this was, like Matt said earlier, a real emergency. And what do they say to Meade when they give him command? You can promote anybody you want. You can demote anybody. We're not going to go through hearings, none of that. This is an emergency. You do what you want. We're not going to hinder you. And with my new district. And on the 30th of June, he actually tells them, I think it was the circular that Meade sent out, and said to his commanders, anybody who fails at this moment, you have the right to shoot them.
Yes.
He actually said that.
Yeah.
You can shoot them. Well, does that tell you something about the urgency of the situation?
Exactly. Yeah,
I don't blame him. I don't blame him. You're trying to win a battle and the country's at stake, and some clown is saying, well, I'm not going to follow orders from you, or, I signed papers for an enlistment for this term, and I don't think what you've done to me is, well, we'll talk about that after the battle, but you might want to pick that rifle up or
be shot.
Yeah. And if I shoot you, the rest of the Army's going to watch, and I might not have this problem anymore.
Hey, I'll make an example out of you. Yeah, no, I know. Well, and that is another thing that is not mentioned a lot, which is that he ordered the death of any man who didn't perform his duties.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you say, that is a great example of what an emergency it was. If you're willing to kill your own men just to get them all to whip into shape, I mean, that's a pretty dire situation.
Yeah, I don't know. Did I answer that question, Mike? Okay. Because we are going off on some tangents.
I'm going a little bit here, but I think when I'm looking at the seniority list, right, Slocum's senior to him, Sedgwick's senior to him, Reynolds is senior to him.
Yeah.
So he's jumped over those guys.
Yeah.
So having the confidence of your colleagues in this case is absolutely important. Did Meade show any insecurity about being jumped over those guys?
Not that I've ever heard. Maybe there's something out there, but I haven't seen it. I didn't get that impression.
Yeah, not that I've ever heard.
Because
did you? Is that a loaded question?
No, that's not a loaded question, because look at how he's handling things. He's holding councils of war.
Right.
He's keeping his colleagues in the know.
Right.
He's getting them to buy into what he's doing.
Right. Yeah.
He's not like Hooker, who's just keeping information to himself and telling commanders when they need to know. So he's involving everybody so he doesn't give them the room to potentially backstab, even though that doesn't work with Sickles.
That's interesting.
But the reality is he is learning from the previous experiences and doing those councils of war.
And he doesn't have the ambition. So he doesn't have the ambition. He's not really worried about that. He's been given the orders to take the command.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So all he's doing is fulfilling his duty.
Absolutely.
And what other people think really doesn't matter. But he is keeping them informed, and he does want their opinions. These are the guys, the Corps commanders, that are on their own fronts. And he's not on their front. He needs their cooperation.
So with the history of the intrigue in the Army of the Potomac, coming off the Joseph Hooker tenure, and having the confidence of his colleagues, was George Meade the best choice at this moment?
Absolutely. I totally think so. The country needed someone who wasn't going to take risk and do something stupid. They needed a conservative guy who's going to fight the battle on the defensive, not go out and say, I'm going to go sock Robert E. Lee in the mouth, arrogant like. No, I didn't ask for this command. It's my duty. And I think he was absolutely the right man for the moment. And that's why it makes me so mad that he gets the criticism after the battle. Because you gave him command 3 days before the battle. He met your conditions, protected Baltimore, Washington. No, he didn't destroy the Confederate Army, but he did everything he possibly could. And I I think he's the right guy. That's just my opinion.
That's it for my questions.
Thank you, Counselor. Well, those were good questions, and I don't know. I keep saying this, and we've done a good number of shows with you regarding Meade, and every time I come out with more respect for the guy than when I went in. And I mean, the guy, and we interviewed Ken Masterson Brown about Meade, and he. He was saying the same thing. He's got a good deal of respect for him. It's a hard job, and he did a fine job. And I don't know any of us who could have done any better. Right. I mean, certainly not any of the three people in this room. I mean, come on.
Well, to be fair, I'd be injured before the battle.
You'd be like Lee riding around in an ambulance because both your wrists are broken.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
I just wondered, did we skip over Roy Meade?
I think we did.
Hi, guys.
I'm sorry.
My question is, what brought General Meade to Lee's attention for consideration of command of the Army of the Potomac? Did we kind of touch on that?
No, I'm sorry. I skipped over that because I scrolled down. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. So he says, my question is, what brought General Meade to Lincoln's attention for consideration?
What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, Mike. What do you think?
Me?
Yeah, I want to hear. Let's see what you have to say.
For me,
unless you don't want to.
What brings him to attention, I think, is that though Lincoln may not be personally involved in feeling out some of these other commanders to potentially replace Hooker, I think he's getting some feedback from him that they have confidence in Meade.
From the other generals in
the Army. And coming off of the two previous experiences with Burnside and Hooker, man, that's a huge selling point.
Doesn't Reynolds...
Yeah.
When he, I think I got this right. When he was offered command, doesn't he say, "No, you want a guy like Meade" or something like that?
Something to that effect. I don't know for sure,
because that's not a documented conversation.
But I know that they had confidence in him and that he hadn't gotten involved in that intrigue at all.
Right.
Besides that meeting with Governor Curtin, which he wasn't willingly trying to backstab Joseph Hooker. He was just being honest to Governor Curtin.
Right.
He hadn't been involved in all this. He didn't have a horse in the game, and he wasn't trying to establish himself as a dictator like Hooker said he was that Hooker was going to do. So here's Meade. I compare him as being that solid interim head coach. You turn to him, he's really good. The team knows him. The players know him. The coaches know him. And you're removing a controversial head coach. And you're putting this guy in charge at a crucial moment. Now, this is weird because the analogy would be we're removing the head coach just before the Super Bowl. Let's just say 12 hours before the Super Bowl. And we're going to replace him with an interim head coach. That seems kind of silly, but that's almost kind of what's happening with Meade here.
Yeah.
He's being brought in to be that safe guy, to be that guy that's not going to make a mistake. And Lee understood Meade. What Lee said about Meade when Meade takes command, right? He won't make a mistake in my front, right? And if I make a mistake, he won't fail to capitalize. Lincoln, you bet, has heard those type of assessments too from Meade. And it's like, okay, so this guy has the confidence of his corps commanders. He has confidence of his subordinate commanders with the exception of Sickles. And he is that safe pick at this moment.
Yeah.
Can I add something that's kind of interesting? I've heard this. Lincoln was concerned about generals being political opponents in the election in 1964. McClellan was his.
Yeah.
And I've heard that Meade was not a threat because to be president, you have to be American born.
That's true. That's true.
Right.
Meade is born in Cadiz, Spain.
Spain.
He's not going to run against you.
Yeah.
So, put a check on his name.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. He's no political threat to him.
Right.
So back then, but wasn't he born on where was he born in Spain?
Cadiz, Spain.
But was it American soil? Was it like a
No.
No, what was it?
No, because his father had been kind of an economic envoy to the court of Spain.
Okay.
And so he was over there with his family. So he was born there.
So he wasn't born like in an embassy or anything like that. So he really couldn't run for president.
Not eligible. He's not a threat.
Wow, that sucks for Meade. But he didn't want it anyway. And the other thing about Meade that I feel is unfortunate is he died very early after the war. Wasn't it 1870 that he died?
1872.
72.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's not
9
very
years
long.
after Gettysburg, so he would have only been about 56 or so.
Yeah, so he didn't have the luxury that a lot of these other guys had of writing about it for 30, 40 years after the fact.
Sickles is living until 1914.
Right.
And he's writing the whole time.
Yep. Chamberlain is. Jubal Early is.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys writing out there, and so poor Meade kind of gets. I mean, and a lot of guys point this out too. Meade, when people come to the battlefield for a tour and they're new to all this stuff, they assume that it was Grant who fought Lee here.
Yeah, where's Grant?
Yeah,
1,000 miles away, Vicksburg.
So poor Meade, but. With the rising popularity of addressing Gettysburg, we are going to change that for General Meade. We are fans of him over here, and we are fans of our fans. So thank you for listening. Thank you for sending in the questions. Jim, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Like I said, you've christened the studio. You're the first guest we've had in our new studio.
Cool. I love that. I've had a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime, Jim. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for listening. We'll talk to you later. Alrighty.
That was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
Are you a reenactor or living historian? Or maybe you're a War of Rights player and want to bring esprit de corps to your team? Well, then you need the Badgemaker, the leading provider of Civil War and other historical badges and insignias. Mention this ad with an attached message in your order and receive a free surprise gift. I myself bought a metal Second Corps badge, and it always starts a conversation when I wear it. So hit up the Badgemaker at civilwarcorpsbadges.com. Something for everyone and anyone.
Our hearts so stout have got us fame, forsooth 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Garryowen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for that shall go to jail from Garryowen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for that shall go to